Introducing Celestial Colon Aid. It's like Gatorade for your butt from outer space. All right, well, that's it. We're going to start this podcast. Welcome to this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Anthony Cube Sorter Extraordinaire Maddox.
I love sorting cards. There is actually a big problem with having a bunch of sorted cards around, which is that I want to shuffle them so bad.
Yes, the pull is strong.
Oh, you know what? Here, I've got some basic lands. I can shuffle these.
I do have a couple of complaints to lodge about your sorting. Number one, not sorted by creature, non-creature. That's pretty tilting. Okay. Number two, you put lands on top, even though on Cube Cobra lands are on bottom. So what's up with that?
Yeah.
Do you have any explanation for this?
No, I thought I was going above and beyond already, and now apparently I haven't done enough. So
no, I'm glad you sorted. I didn't expect it to be sorted, and I think it's really helpful that it's sorted. It's important the cube is sorted, I think, because this episode is a live cube update. You have some additions you're trying to make to the regular cube, and you're actually adhering to 450 now.
No, I'm willing to go a little bigger. Not much bigger, because it is at a point where it's getting a little bit tough to shuffle, but I'll go a little bigger.
Let's shoot for 450.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's shoot for as many cuts as you have additions you want to make. And that's a tough job. So we need help. And we are joined by a special guest. Today we have past stream guests. If you watch the stream or YouTube videos, you will know him from there. He's a member of our local playgroup. It's my personal bracket demon, James.
I'm here to eat your bracket.
You did. You eat my bracket all the time. I started tracking all of my cube games this year, and this has exposed something which I suspected might be true for a while, which is that I have a bad record against you.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until you said it, and now I'm kind of obsessed with
you're pulling the classic, like, I don't think about you at all, like, like
well,
bad man situation.
I haven't really thought, like, I'm not conscious of the people that I grind into the dirt, right?
So yes, you're literally pulling.
I'm conscious.
You're literally pulling the I don't think about you at all.
Right. Well, I'm conscious of the people that grind me into the dirt. So I guess shout out to Max and I guess more recently Anthony for kind of eating my bracket.
That's true. I mean, I feel like you are the better player between the two of us, but last couple drafts, I've narrowly managed to take down a couple matches.
You get me.
I mean, you won. That means you're the better player. That's how it works.
That's true. Yep. Got to update that.
Yeah.
So we have a perfect rock, paper, scissors in between the three of us.
It's good.
Except if I'm on stream.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to win tonight. If you're listening to this live, we're going to be streaming tonight. And
you're pretty down on your deck.
My deck is we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We talked about this 2 weeks ago. We don't say our deck is bad anymore.
My deck is
that's the first thing you did.
Unconventional.
Did I say my deck was bad literally?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
you did.
You both were like, this draft went poorly. And then you posted a list and I was like, oh, Andy's deck looks fine. And then Anthony posted a list and I was like, oh, one of you was right.
I just felt like, well, let's not get too into the weeds about this. We're playing James's Forgiveness Cube on stream tonight if you're listening to this the day it comes out. And you're the designer of the Brea Cube. We've talked about the Brea Cube before, mentioned it in passing on the podcast, because you have historically hated green, but you're trying to mend broken fences with the Forgiveness Cube. So we drafted that remotely to play on stream. And I just felt like every card I picked, I was like, well, this belongs in a different deck, but I have to jam it in here, I guess. I have like some weird artifact matters payoffs, but not enough artifacts for them to work. I have ways to discard, but no benefits for self-discarding because those are in like other colors. I have like a lot of my cards just don't feel like they're at their best. So we'll see if I can cobble together something. But I actually haven't looked at your list in detail. Is it really that bad?
It's pretty bad.
I was confused.
I was confused as well during the entire draft. Every pick, I was like, "What is happening here?"
It's like I looked at it and I thought, I don't know how you get here.
You got to record your draft.
We can go step by step. We can talk through the whole thing.
We do have the draft log. Yeah, we can make a special video.
Yeah, it could be great. This
bonus content, like how to train wreck a draft, is could actually be a fun topic.
All kidding aside, it might be interesting to look at that seat and be like, okay, what should you have done?
Yeah,
right. Because I think I found it beneficial to look back and see, like, okay, draft went bad. It happens. We all bomb a draft every once in a while, but why did it go bad? Was it because you got overcommitted to something, or you read some signal wrong, or you just got unlucky? I mean, I think a lot of times this can just happen where your seed is just bad for the thing you end up drafting, and it's hard to get out of that lane. I also have this theory. With your help, Anthony, I tried to model this a little while ago, and I might return to this concept. I haven't talked to you about this, James. I have this theory about density of different types of cards in a cube, which is that I think given 8 seats, 8 drafters, and the size of the cube, the amount of support for different archetypes, I think, can very likely oftentimes steer people wrong. So, like, hypothetically, let's just say, I have no idea if this is true. Obviously, this is the first ever draft of this cube, but let's just say hypothetically that you have so much artifact support that it seems correct for, 4 of the 8 drafters to read signals and believe that artifacts are open, but then none of them get enough pieces to actually build their deck, right? People often talk about like a trap archetype where it just doesn't have enough support, period. Like if you draft the whole cube and you're the only person in it, you still can't get enough cards to make that deck work. I think the same can be true for like, there's enough support here for 2 3/4 of a drafter. And so that third drafter is just going to get screwed every single time. And I feel like there's got to be some way to describe the densities of different cards for different kinds of decks, whether that's archetypally or if you just go like aggro mid-range control or color combinations, whatever, however you want to describe them. There's probably a way to break down those densities to like maximize for everybody at the table getting a good deck.
Sure.
Would you almost say that about regular cube where somebody's like, it's pick 9, red card's still the best card in this pack, and 4 players are ending up drafting red?
Yeah, for a long time, I felt like blue was being split between 4 or 5 players in my cube every single time. And as a result, people were like, blue is bad. And I'm like, I think maybe blue's a little too good because everybody's taking these cards, mid-pack and thinking that blue's open, and then blue's never open for them because everybody's doing that same thing. Anyway, there's a really complex idea here that I would love to try and model, but obviously it's so hard to model anything in Magic because there's so many variables and everything. But
right. I think there's another aspect of it that some people prefer payoffs and some people prefer enablers. And if they both wind up in the same like archetype, you wind up. I kind of feel like that happened with your draft.
I think
you
that's
have
what
a lot of
specifically.
enablers.
I was like, I'm just going to
I have all the payoffs for your deck, and I never saw the enablers, and I was like, this deck is not open. I took Psy and Emery and Thought Monitor very highly, and now I can't even play them. They're all on my sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, I took also enablers in the sense of I took fetch lands really, really highly, and so I ended up like, I'm glad I got Field of the Dead because that is something to do with this pile of fixing, but like I didn't end up with a bunch of power outliers to justify, playing a bunch of colors, really.
Well, this is a deep dive on this draft, so if you want to actually see how these decks play out, check out the YouTube channel or the stream if you're listening to this the day it comes out. But that's not the topic of this episode. We got to dive into the regular cube. So, Anthony, first, give a description of the regular cube, and I'm going to challenge you, give a description differently than you normally do. We all have our go-to, like, elevator pitch where you're like, it's like a master's level set, blah, blah, blah. Do it differently.
Okay. This is my primary cube. The goal of this cube was to showcase some of my favorite Magic cards. So I sort of set the power level to optimize for making those cards reasonable and fun. Cards include Knight of the Reliquary, which was one of the cards that sort of initially inspired this cube. When you cut it from yours, I was like, we can do cube a different way. Let's actually make this particular card shine. It's only okay here, but that's fine. White Mane Lion was another benchmark card. Feldon of the Third Path was a card that I really was excited by at the time. It was one of my favorite commander decks, and I wanted to see if that could shine in different places. So those are kind of a couple examples. Maybe I can find some better examples. I should not be looking at the land stack.
We have the cube in front of us, too. We're doing this in paper. Just like we always play in paper, we also edit cubes in paper.
Ooh, Metallic Mimic was one that I really enjoyed, and it's a kind of card that I want to be not like busted or not, not played in the optimal way where it's like I'm doing a full-on tribal deck, but it's just really reasonable here as like, oh yeah, if I get like 2 or 3 counters, this becomes a reasonable card. That's kind of the gameplay that I'm looking for with this environment.
I think with 2 or 3 counters, it's kind of a broken card. With 1 counter, it's reasonable. I mean, a 2-mana 2/1 that puts a +1/+1 counter on something is very good, I think, in this environment at least.
And at the same time, there's a lot of like small overlapping synergies. It's not just like every color pair is about this particular mechanic, but there instead are just sort of like a little bit of a mix. So it's like, okay, I like this Metallic Mimic because I might be motivated to play it in a deck that cares a little bit about artifacts or cares about counters or has a little bit of a tribal theme. So it's really about this sort of like flexible card that you might be motivated to play for a lot of different reasons and sort of navigating how do you move this card not from, an F to an A, but how do I, in the draft, sort of navigate this card being a C- versus a B+.
Great description, Anthony.
Thank you.
You did a fantastic job. I should push you to do things differently in the future.
Okay.
James, I feel like you have a unique perspective on this cube because you play it a bunch. Like, you've played it probably as many times almost as Anthony and I have. What do you think of this cube in terms of, like, if you were to describe it to somebody new that was just like, I want to sit down, I want to draft it effectively, what's your angle on this environment?
Yeah, so I guess, like, if I'm trying to give, like, an overview, I really like the description of, like, if you've played, like, a modern Masters draft format before, it really does feel like a modern Masters or a Masters level set. You're seeing a lot of cards that you don't necessarily get a lot of like exposure to, but like they're like pulling their weights in unique and interesting ways because you do have these like very flexible synergies. That being said, like if I am moving on from like the overview to the okay, here's how you spike it.
Okay. This is gonna
The
be
answer,
different.
I can't wait to hear this because I want to get better at this cube. So hit us, James.
I mean, the answer for me is like the aggro is very good in this cube. Is like the level 1. And then, like, on top of that, aggro is also very synergistic. I think all of the greatest decks in the cube tend to be really synergistic. So, from my perspective, I've always kind of favored the Mardu colors. And I think more recently, like, you've really, like, pushed the power toughness and, like, green. That makes, like, power and toughness, I think, in this set and in this cube, more so than other environments I've played, really feel important. If you have a 4/4, that's just going to feel way more massive than, like, playing a 4/4 in like any limited set that you're like used to on like Arena or something along those lines. Like a 4/4 it's not that different from, you know, the Abyss a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really is definitely true about this environment. This comes up a lot where somebody will have a 2/3 and it's like, wow, that really matters here.
Yeah, for sure. So like the synergistic aggressive decks are the ones that I try and like pivot myself into most often, which usually means I'm a Rakdos player. I like playing Rakdos in pretty much every environment, and I think the both of you have created environments that really let me like play in the space.
I think this could also be a little bit of confirmation bias because you're a good player. You prefer these colors. You're like, well, these colors work in both these cubes. This is like maybe you're just better than other people, and so whatever you draft is going to work. You know, maybe a little better than average.
There's definitely an aspect of like I know how to draft an aggro deck. Like, or
Yes.
I'm sorry, if you give me a Rakdos deck, like I'll have a configuration that I feel is correct. That's not the case in other color pairs. I can sometimes feel really lost in other color pairs. That being said, I think one of the things that like the aggressive colors. So like if you're playing a control deck in this environment, I think one of the things that you struggle with is like how do you end the game sometimes. And the thing that like aggro can do is aggro can still deal damage to your life total without having to get into the combat step. And that really pushes.
The thing that Rakdos can do.
I think a lot of the aggressive deck, like so, like
You meant aggro overall.
Aggro overall. I think most of the aggressive colors. So when I say aggressive colors, I'm like thinking Mardu and green for the combat step.
So everything but blue.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because like black has a lot of like drain you with like sacrifice effects. White has a lot of evasion. Poke in with evasion to end the game, and then, red just goes directly to face. So if I wind up in a combination of like any of these three colors, I feel like I can be aggressive early, and then after you stabilize, I'm really live off the top of my deck or with the activated abilities of things I have in play.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually interesting perspective to hear as the designer of the cube, because pushing a more aggressive green deck has been something I've been trying to do. And a big part of that I've come around to and realized is about giving green that exact reach, that like way to deal damage outside of just attacking. And some of it is just like, yeah, 4/4 matters here. So sometimes the aggressive green deck is just about outvaluing you by having a 4/4 and playing the Abyss. And also adding some of the sort of like cheap combat tricks they printed recently, as well as some of the things from like Modern Horizons 2 that have reinforced, or these other like modal spells that can either be a creature or a combat trick, or just another way to give green that kind of reach.
For sure, yeah. Also, Hooded Cobra, is that the card?
Hooded Hydra.
Hooded Hydra.
It's messed up. It's a messed up card. You ever get 2 6/6 tramples, and the second one only costs 4, or you discard it for value and then get a cheap one?
I mean, it's interesting. I've when I put that card in the cube, I was very speculative about it. I thought this is like way overpowered here. This is just going to take over games and nothing else is going to matter. But how it's played out is that decks are low to the ground enough that just putting a 6-drop in your deck is a pretty high cost. And it does also have sort of the potential synergistic interactions of going to the graveyard first so you can cast it for cheaper. I even played in a deck recently where the fact that it came back as a zombie token was really, really relevant. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's been...
That is
that's what you want. That's what you want.
I mean,
like, I'm going to flash.
That's what you want for sure.
And then I'm going to tap 3 zombies with my Crypt Breaker and draw a card.
Nothing like using your 6/6 as a third of a draw a card. It's pretty good.
Well, yeah. I mean, you cast it and then you do it that one time and you attack next turn. It's all good. So,
Jinx, you both owe me a Coke.
You didn't say anything.
Yeah, but I.
That's
not how Jinx works.
You can do outside of Jinx?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to Google this and
leave
check.
in the comments if you think it's okay to do it outside.
Good job.
Jinx.
Way to push engagement. Yeah, if you can do a Jinx from the non-Jinxing party, comment down below.
Right.
How does
Okay.
Jinx work in your part of the world?
So, we often talk about cube design in this very, very abstract sense. I thought it'd be cool, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't done this before, just to do it in a very concrete way and actually just like make some updates to this cube. It's been a couple months since I've made changes. I have a list of cards I'm interested in from the last couple sets that I just haven't gotten around to acquiring yet. And I'd also just like to get your guys' input on how it feels, talk about, in addition to like individual card changes, how the sort of themes and the different colors are playing, and sort of just, get some insight and make some changes to this cube.
Yeah, the closest we've done in the past is just, we've definitely done episodes where it's like, I'm making these changes, let's talk about why. But we've never done you're showing up to the table here with your cube and you're like, I don't know what I want to cut. Let's decide live. So you get a peek behind the curtain.
It's still my cube. It's still my decision. I see some cards you've pulled over there that are... It's going to be difficult. This is. I'm a little bit scared about this. Actually, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun and exciting, but now I'm scared.
All right, so look, I think you should read the list of additions, but I don't think we should spend much time on those, right? If they're cards you're interested in testing, who cares what James and I think? We got to try and play them. So I want to know how many there are, so we know how many cuts roughly we're looking for, and then just read it so people know vaguely what's going in.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I'm also interested in just talking about like the themes in general and like the stuff that I'm happy with and maybe some of the problems that we could address with these changes. So some of the stuff I'm interested in from the last couple sets are things like Enduring Bond Warden. You know, the backup mechanic is just very cool and I think fits in this environment really well. So
a great card that really highlights just how good Metallic Mimic is with only one counter.
Exactly. We got Chomping Kavu, Elspeth's Smite, Hanger Scrounger, Burning Sun's Fury, Pylon, Collective Nightmare, Aerial Boost, Scorn Blade Berserker, Deep Root Wayfinder. That one I'm a little skeptical of for power level reasons.
It's going to be good, but also you don't have as many fetch lands, so like you're not guaranteed to get a land back with a huge regularity.
Placid, Rotten Tail, Cankerbloom. I got to get a copy of this. This one really needs to be in here. Resolute Reinforcements from all the way back in DMU. I've also been thinking a little bit about blue lately. Is it finally time to cut Facet Reader and just throw in Merfolk Looter? So I think there's maybe some like detailed conversations we can have about sort of like more classic cards that have clear parallels to cards that are currently in. I might be interested in just bumping up one or two more white 1-drops, maybe even 1-drops in a couple of these cards. We've talked a little bit about how the cube has a lot of aggressive strategies, but basically I've just like made the cube bigger recently, and I don't think I've increased the number of 1-drops in the same pace. I've got a list of cuts here. You guys have pulled out some cards.
Yeah, let's leave your list of cuts for the end, and let's see how much they overlap, because James and I know nothing of your list of potential cuts. I've pulled some cards here that I think are worth...
That's a lot of cards.
I mean, it's cards to talk about. You know, I'm not saying they all should go, or by my opinion, but I think it's cards that are worth talking about.
So I feel like overall, something I want to talk about is I think I am pretty happy with where green is at. I think this has been one of the challenges of this environment because green is not really about ramp here, and figuring out how to give it an identity has been a little bit difficult. But how do you feel about how it's playing overall?
I've been really enjoying so like you made a lot of green cuts recently, and then the immediate draft after I went Gruul, and it felt great. And I think
I've also done the same thing right after those cuts. I played Gruul on stream and felt like I couldn't lose, which I loved. Which I personally loved.
It's like, so I always thought like Burning Tree Emissary was like a great card in the cube, but like sometimes
it just wasn't played, or it was played in ways that didn't make sense for the longest time.
Like optically, I always thought of it as like, oh, this is a mono red card, or like this is a card that I'm always spending like 2 red on to get and then I'll play like another red 2-drop, and like playing it out in a Rakdos deck, or I'm gonna be saying that a lot. It was fantastic. However, now it feels completely different because,
the card is honestly kind of broken. Like,
yes.
It over its course of time has seen modern play, a little bit of legacy play, I'm even sure. Like, the card is essentially a free 2/2 if you have your deck built around to support it. And I have not had as much success, or maybe I just haven't felt compelled to play it outside of exactly red-green, because it does make it hard sometimes to go 2-drop. Like, if you're playing in your Rakdos deck and you have a black 2-drop, okay, great, you just can't play that one, right? So I have felt like it's been kind of iffy in red or green, but in exactly red-green, I think it is really, really good. And it does, I think, also kind of communicate the kind of deck you want red-green to be, the same way that Fires of Yavimaya and Bloodbraid Elf do. I'm not even sure how many green cards you change. If you literally just change those 3, I think that would be enough to have totally changed the perception of green in the cube, because so often just little tiny adjustments, especially in terms of the more powerful cards in the cube, which is one of the great luxuries you have of playing at a lower power level, is you can just decide to make this color combination better. Whereas if I want to make red-white better, I could design a custom red-white gold card, right? Like, it's not just, I can't just go get a good red-white card.
What do you mean? Just put Winota in. It was great.
I did put Winota in. That's pretty fun. But
I think that's totally true. Like, a lot of the tools were there. Burning Tree Emissary was there. Saddled Rhymestag was there. But a couple sort of signposts that tell people this is the way to draft this color pair really, really shifted the way people have been drafting it.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to stick on red-green for a second, my green suggested considerations relate to this deck.
Okay.
And mostly they relate in the sense that they appear to be for this deck, but either I don't think they're getting there.
Okay.
And that is Sir Farron the Hengehammer and Hero of Lena Tower.
No, I knew you were going to do this.
I have put both of these cards in my deck with the intent of playing them to do the thing they're supposed to do, and both of the times they just don't work. And double green is really hard to justify on Sir Farron, and he ends up in sideboards almost all the time just because of that.
Yeah, I've even got these filter lands just to try and make it work.
Filter lands. Put that on my cut list, too. I hate playing with those. It is so annoying.
They're not the best logistically, but they're there for that reason.
Yeah, they definitely perform a function in terms of allowing you to cast double pip spells, but if you have one in your deck, are you really going to be more willing to play a double pip spell? I feel like it's not enough for me to be excited to play Sir Farron in a deck where I don't have 11 green sources or whatever.
Yeah. I think also as like a CMC consideration for this cube, it's so 2-drop heavy.
That is true. Yeah.
It is.
So having
I have a lot of 2-drops in my stack here.
Okay,
I would say mostly 2-drops.
And that puts so much more pressure on like a card with double green in its mana cost to perform specifically on turn 2, right? And Sir Farron is like, it needs another creature in play, I think, in order to I can't remember if it pumps itself.
Can't target herself.
Yeah. When Sir Farron the Hedgehammer attacks, another target attacking creature gets +S/+X until end of turn, where X is Sir Farron's power. So it's a 2-mana 2/2. It's a bear, but it's green. And I think the payoff is not that high. I mean, like, theoretically, you could put an equipment. I know why it's in here, right? You put an equipment on it.
I just have
you put a +1/+1 counter on
and
it.
a list of equipment pulled up literally right now.
Right, you put equipment on it, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, you, like, modify it in some way, and then you get, like, essentially double that modification. Like, I get the shtick. But I've literally never seen anyone do it in this cube in the entire time it's been in the cube, which I think is since Eldraine came out.
Yeah.
And I just think it's taking up space that could better be used to test other things.
Okay.
I have one other cut here with this deck in mind. You're really not going to like this one.
I'm excited. I don't know what it
I don't know what could be worse.
Rancor.
Whoa.
I think Rancor's too good here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Rancor has kind of toxic play patterns in this environment, and there's not enough ways to, like, you have, I think, a healthy amount of removal, but you are careful about making it all cheap. You're careful about making it all instant speed. You're careful about not having a lot of unconditional removal. Like, a lot of it is get into combat-based or condition on something. And the times I've seen this card shine, it has felt really bad. And I would prefer to see, like, 2 or 3 other cards that are, like, 1 step above the average power level, rather than one card that is 4 steps above the average power level when it works, which I think does serve to, like, push people towards this deck, but also when it does succeed, it's like, ugh, I just can't beat that card.
Have you ever put that on a double strike heroic creature, though?
No.
It's fun.
I mean, I believe that.
But you can also have...
I can show you the face that my opponents make.
You can also have any other equipment or +1/+1 counter spell or aura that doesn't always come back every single time. That's the problem. The problem is not the 2 power and trample. The problem is the fact that you just literally can't get rid of it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and I wanted to pull some cards that I thought were on the high level and low level. It's so easy to cut from the bottom, but we talk a lot about cutting from the top, and I think if we're trying to make a cut from the top with that deck in mind, Rancor would be my number 1 with the board.
No, you know what? I like this. I like this that you're pointing this out. I think maybe when I put it in the cube initially, I was like, this card's really strong. This could be a problem, but people just weren't playing aggressive green decks, so it didn't seem like a problem. Now the cube has changed. People are playing it differently, and I think you're right. And they've also printed a lot of sort of adjacent cards recently that do similar things, but instead of coming back from the graveyard, they draw you a card or things like that. So you still have this, like, aura you're willing to play, but it doesn't have that repetitive play pattern.
I mean, this is in a different color, but compared to, like, Sentinel's Eyes has a very similar kind of vibe, but I think is much more balanced in that you have to be escaping cards from your graveyard. It doesn't just come back inevitably. You could also just say, hey, look, this is the cube where I want to play Rancor. And that's just, like, totally valid, and you can put all other, like, heady cube design considerations aside, because the whole point of having a cube is to get to play cards you want to play. So,
no, you know, this actually works out perfectly because we've talked a little bit about trying to design my next cube, and one of the stipulations is I've tried really hard to not have any cards overlapping.
That's hard.
So just put that Rancor in a different pile, and
There
I'll
you
just
go.
go put it somewhere
Perfect.
else. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten the chance to put it on my double strike heroic creatures, and
it's in the irregular cube though.
Probably.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, okay.
Rancor's cool, but
it's a great card.
First cut, we did it.
I have one other card here pulled that I think is related to this deck, which I find just so boring. This to me is like the equivalent almost of, like, Shouldred in this cube, which is that it's got...
Equivalent of okay, I was going to guess.
It's
I was going to
not
guess.
No, it's not in green.
Oh, okay.
It's not quite that overpowered, but it's just like, this has no synergy. This is not cool. It's not interesting. It just is charging Monster Sword.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just
It's just a big guy.
It's just a big guy, and it's sometimes good. I think a lot of times it's not that good, but like spending a 5 mana slot on a card that has nothing to do with any of your themes, and it's just like, I like a big dinosaur that has trample and haste.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, that's a missed opportunity to be anything that cares about all the themes you're weaving throughout the cube, and like, you'll play this in red-green and be pretty happy to just jam it and smash people, but I feel like it is a missed opportunity to lean into all the synergy that you really like to focus on.
What do you think, James?
I like a big dinosaur with trample and
I
haste.
think a big dinosaur is just like...
Fair.
I like it for the contrast. The fact that it's very different from a lot of the other cards here. It's just like, yeah, it's just a big dinosaur.
It is mechanically very simple, which is the thing I think you enjoy.
I like that.
I think like having something at the higher end of the mana curve that is also just like something that anybody can read really quickly and just say, oh, I know exactly what this card is here to do, does have some value, and I really like that it's a dinosaur.
Dinosaurs are
I'm not ready
indisputably
to
cool.
I'm not ready to put it next to Rancor, but we'll leave it in that pile over there.
Sure. Do you have other thoughts on the red-green deck, James? Or whether or not we should be tweaking any bit of it?
Yeah, not really. I mean, so it's hard to say. Like, I've only done like, I don't know, 3 or 4 drafts of this cube since like you've made the tweak. It's performed well in every single like environment or every single like report of the draft that I've heard. So hard to say whether or not I feel one way or the other without like getting my hands dirty multiple times with it. I know it's a deck that I'm looking forward to drafting now, which wasn't the case beforehand.
Yes.
So
it's a very cool deck now. I'm always excited to see a Bloodbraid Elf in a pack.
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. Maybe we did tune it up a little bit too much. Do you think that it would be reasonable to cut either Bloodbraid Elf or Fires of Yavimaya?
I wouldn't now. I don't think we have enough drafts to say like, oh, this is oppressive. This is like too good. And like,
cutting Rancor is probably the real thing. It's like, these are the cards that are pulling people into the deck.
Rancor is just the thing you just get. You're like, oh, great, cool. I wouldn't want to like nerf this deck at this point.
Okay.
Like, people are excited to draft it. Nobody, as far as I'm concerned, is like tired of this deck yet. Like, even if it is a little overpowered, let it be overpowered for a while. Let people have their fun, and then maybe we come back and you can touch it in a year or something.
I feel like the next thing, so we talked about a deck that has been somewhat successful, but maybe could use some tweaking. The one that's been most difficult is blue-green.
Yeah.
Difficult in the sense that I feel like in the way that adding a couple red-green gold cards kind of changed the way people drafted it. I also threw in a couple sort of random blue-green. I threw in Bring to Light. I threw in Mystic Snake, which is, kind of a cool iconic card, but these did not have the same effect. Blue-green kind of feels a little bit flat.
I think Bring to Light is a very cool card, and I was excited to see it in this cube. It's not a blue-green card. It's like a 3, 4, 5 color card.
Yeah.
So to think that's going to like make blue-green more viable, I don't think that's going to do that at all. I think Mystic Snake is just not good. Sorry, everybody. It's still playing Mystic Snake. 4 mana 2/2. I just don't think it cuts it these days, frankly.
I'm definitely not playing it in a dedicated blue-green deck. It's usually like I'm Sultai or... No, that's just
which I think is fine.
There's also just not enough counterspells here that like I'm playing at instant speed and like holding up mana, which is the only place where I think Mystic Snake is maybe defensible. Where it's
sure.
I never plan to casting sorcery speed. Like I'm not gonna skip casting a 4-drop or even a 3-drop on my turn to hold up Mystic Snake.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned there's not a ton of counter magic. I also threw in a Shardless Agent, and I don't think I've seen anybody play it.
I think that's a mistake. I think Shardless Agent.
Shardless Agent is great.
Great.
You think it's a mistake to cut it? You want to keep it here?
Oh, I like Shardless Agent. I think.
Okay.
I think the card is really cool if you're into Cascade.
Okay.
I like Shardless Agent too. I think the problem is just that people don't know where to put it because it doesn't feel like there is like. That's the kind of deck that also wants to be a really low to the ground deck, but you don't have a blue-green aggro deck here, right? Like if that was a red-green card, it would be nuts. Probably better than Bloodbraid Elf, but it's not. And so it's like, what does the blue-green deck want to be doing? And I don't think there's much of a clear identity for that deck.
Yeah,
that's my biggest problem with blue-green is that, if I get all the blue-green cards, what I have are cards that interact with other synergies in other colors. Like, for example, one of the cards that I pulled out is Merfolk Skydiver, which is like a Simic for a 1/1 that puts a counter on something else and you pay 5 to proliferate. So that card would like communicate to me that like, oh, maybe Simic is like the +1/+1 counter deck, but really like red-white is doing the most with +1/+1 counters in the format.
Or green-white.
Green-white.
Yeah. So the blue really like, I don't know, like that doesn't feel like what Simic is based on like all the other gold cards that like we've talked about and I'm like looking at on the table here. And then the other ones that you have pulled out, you've got Coiling Oracle, which is like, that's a really powerful card, but it's also kind of like a ramp card. right? So
It's like to me, it's just like a pure value
Right.
card,
Yeah.
right? It's like doesn't really synergize with anything. It's just like, if you want a cool like Fibblethip-esque card that happens to sometimes ramp you instead of just draw a card, then it does the job. It's fine.
Okay,
Right.
so here's what I'm thinking though. You're
But
saying
compared to like Baleful Strix, like
yeah. You're saying
Coiling Oracle
Shardless
is
Agent,
not pulling me into blue-green.
You're saying Shardless Agent is kind of cool. It does sort of get people excited to some degree. You don't really like Merfolk Skydiver. Here's my thought: is I actually think Merfolk Skydiver is actually pretty reasonable. It's a on its face 2-mana 2/2 flyer. Like
I don't think it's not powerful. And I
powerful.
actually played it in a recent draft
Yeah.
of this cube. Maybe the last draft we did of this cube. I forget what my deck was. It wasn't straight blue-green, but I definitely played Merfolk Skydiver, and I was like, yeah, this card's good. It's
Yeah,
fine.
but it's not splashy. It's not a card people know. It's not a card that people are going to, be pulled into this color pair for. But I think maybe the issue is the context. The fact that you're seeing this next to Mystic Snake, next to
Right.
Coiling Oracle.
Exactly.
So maybe what I actually want to do is cut some of these other ones, leave Shardless Agent and Merfolk Skydiver, and maybe dig into blue a little bit and see if there's another thing that blue can offer here. And maybe the form that it is just more evasion. Maybe.
Sure.
I mean, even something like Looter Ilcore could be
Terramander?
interesting. Terramander, okay.
Terramander and blue-green, you sicko.
I mean, yeah. I love me like so in the neighborhood of like if we're kind of looking towards green having some like or blue-green having some like +1/+1 counter synergies. I think Graft is a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Backup. I don't know if there's anything in particular. I haven't paid that much attention to Mom, but I like pulled out a card that I thought was like not good, and I'm still a little skeptical of. But we have like Essence Capture in blue here,
Yeah.
which that gives a +1/+1 counter. The fact that it's double blue, I think, is the reason that I'm really off of it.
Right.
It's not gonna. It's like the amount of times it's just not going to do anything on a turn 2 in a format that is aggressively slanted to having a lot of 2-drops is the reasons that I'm really, really off it. But it does signal like blue and green are like have more +1/+1 counter synergies, or if like that's like a lever that you want to pull.
Yeah, I mean, I like this card in theory so much. It's like a counter spell that does some counter stuff, which I mean, now that I'm saying it out loud, I like it even more.
I want to clarify too. Like I also pulled Sir Farron. I agree that being double blue is kind of rough.
Right.
We are not just. I at least am not just like blindly hating on extra pips. I know that like Parnell loves to do this, and I feel friendly enough with Parnell now that I can just call him out a little bit on the podcast without feeling bad about it. They're like really down on multi-pip cards. I think they're great as long as the investment is worth the payoff.
Yeah,
and
sure.
in the case of Sir Farron and Essence Capture, it's like if these were one under green and one under blue, they'd be fine, and they're not. They're like so much harder to cast, right? Like I have Archmage's Charm in my cube, and I've really enjoyed it, and that's triple blue. But I think it really pays you off for doing that
Right,
because
yeah.
you get to steal the Ragavan. Haha, it's mine now.
Rude.
You're thinking like evasion, like a blue-green tempo deck, kind of?
Ooh, yeah.
I'm wondering if blue-green can also have just a little touch of ninjutsu stuff.
So there are 3 ninjas in the cube. We have
They're all mono blue. No, it's blue-black one too.
and the blue-black one. So we got Ninja the Deep Hours, Moon Circuit Hacker, and the blue-black one, which triggers on all your ninjas. That card's kind of scary, to be
It's really
honest.
good. And I had a draft of this cube where I happened to get all 3 of those ninjas in just a 4-player draft in my deck, and it felt very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm also okay. Maybe it's worth mentioning that, like, if any color pair is going to be the color pair to be splashing into more colors, not that I don't do that a lot for cards in the Mardu spectrum, but I feel like blue-green also feels like a reasonable place to be like, oh yeah, if you're doing this tempo-y thing, splashing an extra ninja seems
play
like
a couple
a
Sultai
reasonable
cards,
thing.
yeah. Yeah, there are a fair amount of green ninjas from Neon Dynasty. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know that was one of the green mechanics there.
True, yeah,
for the first time it was actually brought to green. And I wonder if that could then take advantage of the more aggressive green creatures that you already have for like the green-white and the green-red decks, and also take advantage of some of the evasive stuff you have in blue and make a new thing. That's a deck I'd be thrilled to play Shardless Agent in,
Right.
I think. And then the question is, like, is there another really, like, appealing payoff you can put in the cube that will pull people into that deck? And I don't know if there's something that is, like, very
Hadana's
blue-green.
Climb?
Donna's Claim would be very strong.
Yeah, I don't
definitely
remember the exact.
Kind of cool. I
I
mean,
haven't.
Okay.
looked at
it's
the
what?
text in
Let
a
me
while.
try and remember. I know it's like 2 blue-green, right? So it's 4 mana. And
I believe it's just 3.
Is
Yeah,
it
it's
just
3.
3? Oh, that's even better. I'm thinking of the other one from that same set, the uncommon, though, because Hadana's
You're
Climb is
thinking
the
of
rare,
Bounty
right?
of the Luxa.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
That's also really cool. though.
Hadana's Climb puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature at the beginning of combat, and then if
If you have
that
3
creature
counters, you flip it.
you flip it into
We
something.
could look it up, but this is more fun.
No, this is more fun. Hadana's Climb, I think, would be that's a pretty cool pull, I think. Like,
Yeah.
you just had that one off the dome, but
Interesting.
that definitely would speak to what you essentially want this deck to do. I will say +1/+1 counters and Ninjutsu feels like a nombo, because I don't want to be
Sure.
putting counters
Yeah,
in my
that's very
things and then
true.
bouncing them back. I would even look at, like, you already have Fibblethip in this cube. You have a couple other, like, cheap enters the battlefield creatures. We just said we were going to cut it, but like Coiling Oracle in this deck is not unreasonable. Like
That's
if you
true.
can actually ninjutsu a Coiling Oracle
I mean,
and
Merfolk
recast
Skydiver
it.
fits perfectly here, where it's like you can put that counter on something else, you can ninjutsu it, pick it back up, and then move that counter somewhere else.
It does kind of fit
got the
perfectly,
words.
but I don't think people are going to make that connection.
Sure, yeah,
because I'm going to look at that and be like, well, I don't want to be proliferating in my ninja deck, and I don't want to put a +1/+1 counter thing I intend to bounce. I think the +1/+1 counters and ninjutsu feels a little bit at odds. And what I would want is like more cheap evasive threats with any kind of like trinket enter the battlefield ability.
Sure. So the card that really like screams this to me is Bred for the Hunt, which is an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Like that
Ooh,
really.
curiosity effects. Let's talk about curiosity effects. That's kind of interesting.
But before we move on from cheap things with enter the battlefield effects, what about Croaking Counterpart? This is 3-mana sorcery, makes
I hate
a
the art.
1/1 copy. That's fair, but also has flashback, so you can twice double up on an ETB.
I'm sorry. Show me the art. I got. Okay, so target non-frog. Well, that's not relevant. Okay.
Well, you can't make a
You
second
do have
copy
some
of the same thing.
changelings. You do have some changelings in the cube. It's
That's
not
also
completely
true.
irrelevant.
Oh, okay,
That's
sure,
true.
sure.
I think that card is ugly. I think if you were going to ugly in terms of art and
Mechanically?
also mechanically, if you're going to do that, just put in the
You hate that art?
Just put in the mono blue one. What's the mono blue one that does the exact same thing except it makes an actual copy? It's not a 1/1.
Cackling counterpart.
Yes.
Oh,
The
sure.
flashback is
that card would be busted because it's an
I
instant
don't think
as
it's
well.
busted. The flashback is more expensive on that one, but if that's something you want to do, I would try that before I would throw Croaking Counterpart in here.
Sorry, what was the card we just mentioned?
Curiosity effects.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my appeal for curiosity effects. You already have things that care about heroic being targeted. You already have some
True.
stuff that cares about auras. And you also have stuff that cares about drawing a second card a turn in blue.
That's
Right.
true.
And so I'm wondering if you can find some... I think curiosity tempo decks are so cool. And you also have more removal in green than your average cube does. So the idea that you could like suit up a thing and have it punch blockers out of its way to get in and keep drawing cards. It's kind of snowball-y, but snowball-y in the way that I think is really satisfying and rewards you for having built your deck in this cool way. Again, what is then the clue that tells you, oh, I should be in blue-green curiosity? I don't know what that is. I have to do some Scryfall searches, but... This is Andy in the editing booth. Obviously, Keen Sense, the color-shifted curiosity from Planar Chaos. You put Keen Sense in there. You have curiosity in both blue and green. All right, back to the show.
Yeah,
Let's not worry
I
too
feel
much
like-
about additions.
I feel like, we're going to end up making a bunch of cuts here and then have some ideas. I mean, something else that I've had in the cube in the past is Lore Scale Coatl, which is a card I still kind of like. Whenever you draw a card, you put a counter on it, and that fits in that space. I mean, I could see that being a draw or like something that sort of gestures toward this.
If you had, like, that card, I've been hesitant to play in the past because if you draw it late, it's also just a 3-mana 1/1. Or maybe
also,
it's a 2/2.
A lot of the removal has a hard time with once it gets up to being like a 5/5. It's
Yeah,
just
Right.
That's
It's the
true.
kind of thing where if you play it early and they don't have removal in the first 2 turns, then it's just kind of like, well, can't beat that.
Yeah, which I think why I cut it in
Whereas
the
if you
past.
play it late, it's just not that good. But if I had curiosity effects, I might actually start looking at a card like that more highly. So let's just focus on making room for the potential cards we might add, because we can't do
All right, you got blue cards?
we can't do intellectual Scryfall searches in our head and just like imagine them. All right, you should cut Floodhound.
Yeah.
I'm tired of talking about
All
it.
right, great.
I think Scob Wrangler is a really, really bad payoff for the zombie deck. Every time I start reading it, I'm like, oh, is this going to be the one where I get to draw a card and lose a life? And then it's like, tap a creature. And I'm like, why would I? No, I'm never doing that.
I mean, it's
There's so many other rewards in
yeah.
this cube for going wider than your opponent and having more creatures that I'm not going to be tapping their creature down.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sacrificing my stuff for value or whatever. I also think that Fair's Brand Brawler, this is a 6-drop in green. We just talked about how I think Honored Hydra is, I think, fine here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a bomb. It's like a cool card that pays you off, and it's so much better than Fair's Brand Brawler.
yeah, that's true.
And then I also...
I wish there was something like at 5 mana that was... Oh, there is.
Yeah, there
What
is.
about
Idric
that?
Stomper or whatever. Idric.
Well, that one also costs 6, but there's also an elk, right?
Yeah, Stag. Great Horned Stag.
We can do it.
I have no idea.
Who can name the card?
It's 3 green for a 5/3 or 4/3
I think it's a 4/3 that fights.
that fights on ETB.
Fight elk. I'm just writing down fight elk.
It's definitely something Stag. I can't remember what the first part of it is. I also wonder if
Somberwald Stag.
Somberwald Stag. Thank you. I
Hey,
also
4/3 enters battlefield, fight creature you don't control. We got there.
yeah. I also would not miss Earl of Squirrel, and you might.
Yeah, we can't cut that.
Okay, fine.
I agree.
Those are the things I have in my stack that could make room for blue-green cuts. Do you have any other blue-green cards you've pulled out, James?
I didn't get I think like you hit everything that I
I guess
would on green.
we could throw Nature's Chain in here too. It's hybrid, but I don't think
Interesting.
you have high enough value artifacts. You have some high value enchantments, but they're so few and far between. I'm never prioritizing
Yeah.
that. I would much rather see, like, put a Reclamation Sage in here. That's good in the
it's
Ninjutsu
in there,
deck.
isn't it?
Well, great. Then you don't need that at all.
Yeah, I added the...
Put Kappa Cannoneer in here. That's the one that's
no.
not Kappa Cannoneer. Kappa Trek Wrecker.
Kappa Tech Wrecker?
The Ninja
That one's
Turtle.
also pretty good, but the Ninja Turtle, sure.
Yeah, put the Ninja Turtle in. That is a Ninjutsu card in green that pays you off and does the thing that thing does.
Yeah, that's fair. In terms of like blue cards, so I went through the blue cards really quickly. I think you hit the big one, which for me was Blue's Clues. But the other ones, you kind of already mentioned it, but like Facet Reader, like it's a 2-mana 1/2 that I have to pay mana to draw a card and
I
discard
think
a card.
this card is fine. The fact that it has so many direct comparisons to cards that are
Exactly.
just well known and more powerful just makes it... People just will not put this card in their deck.
Yeah,
That's the kind of card I'm okay with if I have nothing but instants in my deck, and
Yeah.
I can eventually then, if I don't have to spend a counter spell, or I don't have to spend a removal spell because my opponent did nothing, great, now I'll have this gravy of draw a card and discard a card. But without that, I'm never... I tried playing that in my mono blue starter deck for a while when it was more graveyard focused, and it feels so bad.
I do want to come back to the graveyard thing at some point, because this was something you mentioned a couple drafts ago, which was that you feel like there's a lot of stuff sort of gesturing towards or like implying to do stuff with the graveyard, but there isn't maybe enough stuff to really pay you off there.
Did I say that?
You said that.
Weird.
Okay.
Can't remember doing that, but...
Well, then never mind. Let's not circle back to that.
Yeah, I think the other thing is like a 1/2 is real bad in this environment. It doesn't block well. It doesn't, attack well. It's just kind of there almost like
Yeah.
an enchantment.
Okay, what do you
Your
think
phone's
about...
about to fall out of your pocket, Bracket Demon
fine.
James. Okay.
What do you think about either Merfolk Looter or Looter Ilkor?
I'm surprised you'd be into Looter Core just because Shadow is so ugly
Shadow is
mechanically.
ugly, but it does a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about.
It does have, evasion. I don't think either is going to be too powerful, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I think Merfolk Looter, people have played this card for so long, for just generic environments, like for just generic card selection. If I don't have something in my graveyard, though, I don't want this card at all. I think looting on a 1/1 for 2 mana repeatedly is not good enough card selection. It's like
But I think people will put it in their deck.
people will put it in their deck, and it has the benefit of being iconic, right? Like people will read it, they'll know what it does. They don't have to read the rest of the card. People have to read Facet Reader.
The synapses are firing with like we've been talking about the blue-green deck, so like Looter Core, Curious Obsession. Now we're talking.
Curious Obsession is the curiosity effect to play, by the way. That's like the best one, I think, if you want to make people actually put cards in their deck. I wonder, is there like a flyer that just ETBs and loots once or something for 1 or 2 mana?
There's a Scry Fairy, but that's not...
There's also all the Augury Owls, which are kind of Scry, but not
Yeah,
quite,
I
because you
don't
can't
love
bottom
those.
cards. Why do you have Fading Hope pulled out there? I love Fading Hope.
So here's my thing. It's not a bad card. I'm just very down on like bounce effects in this environment because
The environment is very value focused. Like getting that
There's a
card
lot of
advantage
ETBs.
is really important, and there are a lot of ETBs. That's true.
so if I'm in a blue deck, I feel like very rarely I'm only ever going to be up on like 2-3 mana, I guess, because in general, like there's not a lot of like 6-drops that are being played that you want to bounce, because usually they might have like a really great enter the battlefield effect. I think the blue decks in general aren't leveraging this for tempo in a way where they can pressure their opponent's life total. So it feels like in most of the decks that I have drafted in blue, this would wind up being like a defensive
Interesting.
unsummon, and that's not great in this environment.
If we are pushing this Curiosity deck, though, I exactly want that in
Sure.
my,
Yeah,
in my
that's-
like Curiosity deck.
I think that's a good point. Like I was excited for them to print an unsummon with a little bit extra, because unsummon is definitely not quite relevant here. And I actually had a different one from a Modern Horizons set that was just like too much words that didn't matter
that
most
one
of the time.
A bummer.
So I'm gonna leave it there for now because of the like change in context that we're talking about. But I think
Also, I play blue-red a lot more in this environment than you do, I think.
That's true.
And I like it a fair bit in blue-red.
That's fair.
Where I am going to be more aggressive than just sitting back, and I'm not using it. If you're using it as like a just buy time unsummon, it's pretty bad. But
Yeah.
if you are aggressive, and I think there are a number of blue decks here that can be aggressive, and maybe a new one that we're talking about, I think it can actually pull its weight. Especially because once things get to 4 toughness, like you said, good luck removing them in most decks. And so if you're not playing black and they get to 4 toughness, I like having one of those just to be like, all right, get rid of that Hydra for a turn. Let me actually keep getting in, and then we'll deal with it later.
Sure. Yeah, that all makes sense. And then the last blue card that I've pulled out here is Quicken. I think on rate, it's fine. It's 1 mana, draw a card. But like all of like the aspirational text of like you suddenly give a sorcery flash has never come up.
why do you hate dreams so much?
I hate dreams that aren't realized.
Okay.
And very rarely in a blue deck am I going to have 1 blue To then also
Wait,
cast
can I
the
have those blue
sorcery.
cards?
Yeah.
I mean, all the blue cards.
Oh, all the
big
blue
stack.
cards. Yeah.
Pull out some cool sorceries now.
I'm a little curious.
I would be looking specifically at like 1 and 2 mana sorceries because I agree you're not getting to like instant speed or wrath with Quicken. I don't think realistically.
Quicken a Callous Dismissal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess that's cool.
Yeah, there aren't. A lot of the cheap blue spells are already instants, so maybe. I mean,
That's what's kept me from putting Quicken in my cube.
You
I
actually
think,
put this card in this cube.
I did. It's true. So I mean, I'm not gonna say you should cook Quicken. I still think it's cool. I also just like 1 mana cantrips. I play a lot of blue red, so that's why. I get your point, but also that's the kind of dream I would still want to encourage people to try and live. But the reason I haven't put it in my own cube for what it's worth, and I have thought about it, is specifically because I have very few sorceries in general. Like, you'd be kind of a build around to have enough sorceries to make Quicken do anything other than draw a card.
Yeah. All right, maybe we should cut Quicken.
Oh, sad.
But if we put in Terramander...
No, I feel like I've lost.
All right, anybody want to talk about more blue cards?
You pulled out Whirler Rogue. I think that card is very good and almost generically so. It makes artifacts, so you can kind of justify... This is the Fable of the Mirror Breaker of your cube.
Yeah.
In that it doesn't matter that it makes artifacts and tokens. You'll just play it in any blue deck, and it's correct to do so.
Yeah.
Which is maybe what you don't want. I don't know.
I was very ready to just say, let's cut this card. It is like just a little bit overpowered. People know what happens. But the fact that we're talking about this like more evasive style blue deck, it also just makes other things unblockable. Like you just play this on turn 4 and suddenly your thing with Curiosity is unblockable.
But just put in like a Wingcrafter instead or something. Is Wingcrafter already in here?
No, but that's definitely fits all this.
What is Wingcrafter?
That's a Soulbond flyer for 1 mana.
Oh.
It gives a thing flying.
Yeah, there's got to be like a slightly less powerful version of Whirler Rogue that you could find.
There's
I
not?
Think, oh, okay. Well,
there's
never
definitely
mind.
things that ETB and like make a Thopter or make a whatever, like, 1 token, like they exist.
The 2 Thopters is, I think,
3 bodies for 4 mana
exactly
is like board stall city in this cube. Like it's going to block so many things reasonably that I find it just like contributes to more sprawling board states. All right, we've talked about blue a lot. Anything else on blue?
I mean, maybe it's worth just reflecting a little bit. Like, we've got this artifact theme. I feel like that's in a good place.
Yep.
It's fairly focused in blue, like Psy Master Thopterist, and then is like one of the big reasons to be playing it in blue. If we are losing Whirler Rogue, I think, that doesn't really matter.
Whirler Rogue doesn't actually trigger Psy.
Right.
It doesn't actually trigger Traxos. It doesn't, actually trigger a lot of the things that deck cares about the most.
Yeah, and then we've got, like, Archaeo
put in Network Disruptor. Network Disruptor is good for the Ninjutsu deck. It's good for the Artifact Matters deck, and it, fits in a lot of places.
Can we get the Puppeteer back in?
Puppeteer?
What's it called? The one that makes the homunculus.
Homunculus guy. I protest.
We could do that. We
could do it.
We could do anything we want.
I think the cube's in it. Okay, so there's some context here, I suppose. What's the card actually called?
Puppet Conjurer.
Puppet Conjurer. So this is like the 2 mana human that's like a 1/1.
2 mana 0/1.
Okay, never mind. Oh, it's out.
It is an artifact as well.
Yeah, it is an artifact. The homunculus tokens, I believe, are also artifacts.
Yes, that's the thing that makes it somewhat just. It's a 1/2. It's a 2 mana 1/2.
It's a 1/2. It makes
pay
a
blue,
0/1.
Tap it, make an 0/1 homunculus artifact creature token. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a homunculus.
And the context here is you've had this in a previous iteration of the cube.
It was in the first iteration.
Yeah, and
you were mocked mercilessly for it.
It became kind of an arch enemy situation where we were all like, cut it, and you're like, no, but he's just a little guy. He's so cute.
He's just a little guy. That's exactly
just
what
a little guy.
It's like very cool with the Goblin Engineer. Is that what it's called?
The red card?
Yeah.
Just
so
because
if
you
you're
can
playing
sacrifice a homunculus and put a cheap artifact into play.
That's correct, yeah. And the Goblin Engineer can entomb your Puppet Conjurer because, as you mentioned, he's an artifact wizard.
Oh, so
I did that one time and it felt great.
Uh-huh.
Well, great. And then you cut it, right? Because you're I did the thing.
So it became a little bit of a meme, but now I think
do you actually think it's playable here?
I think it's getting to a point where it's worth potentially trying. The fact that it is,
I think it's substantially worse than Facet Reader, which we just talked about cutting.
It's a fog forever for 1 creature. Mm-hmm. It's basically Icy Manipulator for 2 mana.
Assuming the creature doesn't have any kind of evasion whatsoever at all.
Yeah.
And they have no way to remove a 1/2.
Why would they? This thing basically has hexproof.
I fully accept that I might be your worst devil right now, but this is me on your
the
shoulder.
Puppet Conjurer devil sitting on your shoulder.
Oh, Puppet Conjurer.
You can put it back in and it can ride sideboards for another 6 months. That's fine. I mean, it's your cube. Let's move on. I want to talk about Black Red, which is a archetype that I think for a while there was broadly considered one of the best decks, if not the best deck in the cube, and is still very, very well supported.
Yep.
I think it's also very well supported by a lot of cards that do not excite me and are like the C- level cards that I just put in my deck because they're there, but are not actually what's pulling me into this playing this archetype, and they're just like kind of free payoffs that I'm going to wheel every single time and just go in my deck and don't fit anywhere else. I'm talking about cards like Legion Vanguard, Reassembling Skeleton, and especially Hobble Fiend and Blood Aspirant, which I can never remember which one's which. I see these cards in the pack, and I know that one of them is the other, and I have to read which one it is because they're so similar to me. They're like forgettable 2-drop sacrifice matters payoffs. I would miss exactly none of these personally.
Wow.
James, you're the red black mage here.
Yeah, I don't think I've played any of these cards.
Yeah, like you just don't put them in your deck.
Oh, I play Legion Vanguard. I like Legion Vanguard. I think
Legion Vanguard has been cooler than I expected.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
put that back.
Yeah. I like Legion Vanguard a lot. I think it's on the upper. It's on. I'm sorry. It's one of the less powerful like sacrifice outlets in the cube. But also, I think like a 2/2 is pretty good on raid. The fact that it can grow bigger, the fact that it can find lands. I think it's got a lot more flexibility in creating like a wider range of games than something like Hobble Fiend.
yeah. I just think this deck loses almost nothing to cut these cards.
Sure.
And
I do agree with that.
if anything, this deck is by most people's reckoning over-supported. So
Yeah.
this feels like free space to me. That could be anything else to encourage other kinds of themes that you're looking for.
What I'm struggling with, though, is like this strategy is a little bit over-supported. What makes sense to take from it? Like, does it make more sense to cut some of the more powerful things? Does it make sense? Like, Reassembling the Skeleton, I think, is important. Well, I think all three of those are important because they say they're very explicit about being part of that theme, which I think
Do you think
makes
you need more of that? I feel like there are already so many cards in the cube that just say that so
I
blatantly.
think without that really explicit messaging, it's the players that are very familiar with the environment that are getting into this deck and sort of dominating. I think that having it like explicit routes into it actually makes it, like you were talking about at the top of the episode, splits the archetype between more players, depending on the group that we're playing with.
The red-black deck that I usually wind up playing don't include those cards, I think in part because, and I pulled them out here, the red aggressive 2-drops, there are just some like really fantastic cards that generically go in any red deck, are super powerful on their own, and it just winds up pushing these like more speaking about the synergy cards to making them like the 24th, the 25th, the 26th card.
So I mean, is the right answer then to be cutting? You've pulled out Kari Zev and Earthshaker Kenra. Does it make more sense to be cutting those?
I would not miss Kari Zev personally. I think that card is in a Whirler Rogue-esque territory of it's correct to play it in basically every red deck.
That is definitely true.
Yeah.
It also means I get to shave a
doing a whole
token
lot.
from the token box. So yeah, maybe incidentally, just like on a whim, Kari Zev gets cut.
Yeah, I've done fantastic. The kind of...
You've done fantastic things with that monkey? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, so the amount of times that I've metallic mimicked named monkey and then attacked with Kari Zev, it's twice, which is more than... I've done it twice.
It's not that much, but it's weird that it happened twice.
The grin on your face as you say that, we're saying this is maybe not great, but also clearly it was great for someone.
I think, Kari Zev is like the best 2-drop in the cube. It's
definitely,
on the short list.
It's definitely up there.
Yeah. So
Saddled Rhyme Stag is pretty good.
Saddled Rhyme Stag is also pretty good, but I think it's
two of them together actually.
There you now okay, put it back in there.
So
no.
Just to kind of maybe rebut your idea that only people that know the cube would read that there's a red black sacrifice theme without these 4 cards. Just my first pass of each of these piles, I pulled Viscerous here, Carrion Feeder, Gravecaller, Living Honest Devotee, Village Rites, Bone Shards, Nested Shambler, Weaponize the Monsters, Mog War Marshal, Bogard, and Dragonheart, Carries Zev's Expertise. All those cards to me say Sacrifice Deck. There's also Judith in the gold section, which says Sacrifice Deck to me.
Yep.
These are the reasons to play this deck. And I don't think it's interesting to make the distinction between an overpowered deck and an oversupported deck. I don't think this deck is currently overpowered.
Right.
I think the buffs to red-green and some of the other changes you've made have maybe brought it more into balance. I do think there's just so much of it. I just see these cards at the end of the pack, even though there's already 2 people in this deck, and they still get these cards 14th pick because nobody's taking them because there was a better card in the pack for this deck already.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
we've cut Ranker, so my dream of, I don't remember which one, it's either Hobble Fiend or
Exactly. It's impossible to remember which one.
One of them lets you sacrifice enchantments, so that dream is...
That's Blood Aspirant, yeah.
Fine, put them in the pile.
The pile.
Blood Aspirant sacrifices enchantments?
Yeah, exactly. Who
Well,
knows?
it's from,
No one knows this.
The set that I can't not think of as Towson Hot Bagels because that's how my brain is broken.
Theros Beyond Death. Towson Hot Bagels is a local bagelry, everybody. Local to Baltimore bagelry.
Introduce
I've
the
never
sponsor
been.
of the podcast.
I did recently add a couple other black-red cards that might sort of signal pushing some different directions. Blazing Spectre, which Trample Haste hits somebody to discard cards. I feel like I've been okay with that. Like, it's a lot of card advantage. It's kind of out of nowhere, but it is only a 4-mana 2/2, so I
it's
feel like
a card I remember
okay.
loving when I was a kid, but you don't have the old border version of it, so that's my only
true,
criticism.
That's true. I also threw in a Hackerbat, and I don't know what Hackerbat's here for. I'm just going to put that.
Hackerbat feels like it was you needed
like I've never read
450
this card.
cards to draft with 10 people. That's what Hackerbat feels like.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess my question is, are there other types of black-red effects that would not be maybe totally different?
You also
but
have
be
Dreadnought
like,
Butcher in this cube. There's so
Dreadnought
many.
Butcher,
There's so many
yeah.
black red
Yeah.
sacrifice cards in this cube.
So is there another theme that would, there'd still be enough support here, but like a gold card that could be like, hey, try doing this other thing with black-red?
That's a great question. So the other thing I think black red can be, but currently is not,
Just
realistically.
like hard control, just like tons of removal?
No, I mean, I think you would need card advantage for that to be
Sure.
exciting. Like, play the same removal in a deck with all the sacrifice creatures that just come up the board and like stall and then give you incidental win conditions. I think that's a better way to do that. I was going to say like more like a Spellcast Matters deck, kind of similar to blue-red. Like, you have all the red spells, obviously. There's also a lot of good black spells. There's things like Village Rites to sacrifice tokens from Young Pyromancer and like draw 2 cards. Like, some of the cards are there. The question is, what is a really good like black-red spells matter payoff? Honestly, I think the closest one right now, and it's really good, is Rixmani Reveler.
Yeah.
Because you have cards in your hand that are cheap. They affect the board. They remove something. They go to the graveyard. Then you just refill. I wonder what else could possibly push a like black-red spells matter thing, if anything. Or if that's even appropriate.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, nothing really comes to mind on that front. I think like when people like sit down and we draft, usually there's like 2 people in black red. One of them's more burn focused. One of them's more sacrifice focused. That's the end of that sentence. And
I so appreciate you letting us know, because so often your sentences, it's unclear, and I just don't know when I should respond.
Yeah, what else? I mean, what is a good like black-red? I'm thinking of like all the black-red spells payoffs tend to be just black or red cards,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like, I think that deck also really likes like an Unearth, because your things like Young Pyromancer are really high value, so it's like really valuable to get them back, and it's another spell that triggers your cheap
Right.
spell stuff.
Which is fine, but what we're talking about here is not just like how do we make the deck functional,
How do
but
you
how do we
draft
make
it,
people
right.
see it.
Yeah.
there's also like I don't know, discard and like madness effects are like really prevalent in black red, and I think that's always really fun to kind of like
Oh,
draft
that's actually
around.
what I was thinking about. Terminal
That is
Agony.
something I have said before,
Okay.
which I still feel fairly strongly about.
Okay.
There's a couple of madness cards that really make me want to be able to madness things, and then there just feel like there's so few discard outlets. Specifically discard outlets in red, because
Yeah.
that's where you want it. Like, you have Thrill of Possibility. Can you name another discard outlet in red? Let's check.
There's the one from Eldraine, the adventure card. Haggle,
Right? There is the Haggle
Haggle,
and the
merchant
creature.
of whatever.
The Veil.
Sure.
But I think that's it. Scrapwork Mutt is kind of a red
Scrapwork
card.
Mutt,
That's a
yeah.
relatively
Yeah.
recent addition.
Multi-cube All-Star.
Like, I really want to make Avacyn's Judgment and
Yeah.
Fiery Temper
Fiery
shine.
Temper.
And I did this in the reason I'm so, I think, aware of this is I did this in our rotisserie draft that we did at CubeCon. I missed out on some of the like generically good burn spells because they went to other drafters, and I ended up with Fiery Temper and Avacyn's Judgment in my deck, and I was looking at the whole cube like, cool, I have no way to discard cards. I mean, I ended up taking Bomat Courier and Rixmani Reveler as my main discard outlets, but I would just love like 2 more playable discard outlets, and I feel like there are plenty of red cards that would like fit that could also like overlap with other themes that would like fit that idea and also work there.
Blazing Rootwalla. I love that card. I'm just naming cards here. Voldaren Epicure. I don't know how you feel about blood tokens, but that's a card that always I feel like on
Okay.
its own
Epicure
it
is
performs well.
good. Epicure also, to me, honestly, kind of says sack deck because it gives you 2 permanents.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it
Yeah.
overlaps with both. I love blood tokens for that reason.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. I like making game pieces, and then
Yes, you do.
I just have 3 more red cards here that aren't actually related to the decks we've been talking about. I don't think Thermal Alchemist is any good. It's like a Spells Matter payoff, but like you have Young Pyromancer and Dragon's Rage Channeler and Grim Lavamancer in this cube. This to me is like many tiers below those.
I agree.
Also, Cinderclasm. Talk to me about how you want people to play this card.
Well, I want them to tap a mountain and at least one other land.
Okay, buddy. Okay, wise guy. To me, this feels out of place here just because it feels like it hard punishes certain types of strategies in a weird way that feels like it doesn't really match with anything else any other color is doing, except for exactly one black card, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point that I saw James pull.
yeah.
So I don't know. That one feels out of place to me. And then I also just don't like Changeling Berserker.
I feel
5/3 haste
I like that
champion
card.
for 4
okay
mana.
with Changeling
What?
Berserker.
Oh wait, okay, as in like you like it?
I like it.
Okay, good.
I wish it were better. I think Champion is a really cool mechanic. I feel like it's a mechanic that kind of flopped, but it works for me.
So this is one of those cards that, like, I agree. On its face, like, it really doesn't inspire, but every time I've wound up casting it, it's felt great.
Well,
There
maybe
you go.
it's my
How
fault
many-
for not
is it-
casting
is it
because I'm
twice?
not drafting it, so
It's-
that's why I'm not casting it, I
It's
think.
twice.
Okay, fine. I mean, I feel like maybe Cinderclasm is there as a like theoretical answer to some decks make a lot of tokens, and I had what was the other similar one that was just much more splashable that people actually did play that one and it was kind of punishing. This because it's double red to deal 2 damage to everything felt more appropriate. Felt like
It's just,
I'd
I
be a
think
little
it's
bit
the
more committed.
only like area of effect spell in
Yeah.
all of
Okay.
red. It just feels kind of weird. Like it's a red controlling card, I guess, and it's like what red deck is trying to control? I don't know. Feels weird.
Yeah, it feels like a card I'd bring in the mirror and then just, like, pass for my first 2 turns.
I can imagine one of the reasons you might put this in the cube is the idea that like, ooh, like the red-green deck can play like big creatures, and then this is like a one-sided board wipe that was a build around. But
red-green was
realistically,
kinda
I don't think
changed.
that's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, red-green is still the big creature deck, but like you are playing 2-drops and 3-drops with like 3 toughness, but it doesn't feel like that's how it's actually being played at all.
Fair. Okay. Let's get rid of it.
You can put this back in there. I decided this card's fine.
This card, Mayhem Patrol, I
had to
also
read it
agree-
again because I also got it confused with the other 2-drops
Yeah.
that I have to read every single time. But I read it again and I'm like, yeah, this is fine.
It's fine. I like some aspects of it. I don't like other aspects of it. All right, you want to cut Thermo Alchemist. I actually want to cut Electrostatic Infantry. I feel like the blue-red spells has been a little bit
Wow.
overpowered. Like
I
just
don't
a
think it has
little
been
bit.
at all. Has it 3-0'd any draft in recent history?
3-0.
Did
My
Luis do that
face.
recently?
What was Luis playing when he threw the regular? We can check the
Might have been
Discord
another
log.
cube.
You two talk amongst yourselves. I'll check the Discord log.
I feel like this is just like a little bit too far.
Really?
Compared to Young Pyromancer and Dragon's Rage Channeler?
Those are also more fun. I think it's about
That's
a
true.
density.
That's very true, though.
I'm also looking at Spellgorger Weird, and it's like incredible how this card is like marginal. But Electrostatic Infantry, I feel like, is now one of the best red 2-drops.
I have learned from trying to make Mana Gorger Hydra work in my cube that the difference between 2 and 3 is
Massive.
huge. In this deck specifically, that also wants to be like
Yeah.
playing a 2-drop and casting a cantrip immediately to grow it so
Yeah.
it gets out of the range of removal. Or, playing a 2-drop and holding up a burn spell or a spell pierce or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
2 and 3 is just it's a huge gap.
But I will say, like, since I added Balmor and some other like more explicit spells matter payoffs that are
Sure.
a little bit more appealing, people have been playing Spellgorger Weird, and it's fine. So that's where my feelings are. Got too many 2-drops.
Most
Let's cut
recent
this
blue-red deck, 1-2.
Well,
That might not have been.
2 most recent 3-0s have been red-green and Esper.
nice full spread.
I went 2-1 with blue-red control deck a while ago. Luis did 3-0 with the blue-red deck a little while back.
Hey, there we go. We're finding the decks. We got data here to back up our upside down deck picks.
I would say looking at this, the most clear signal, which is something I've always felt, is that red is great.
Yes. All right, let's cut red card.
Red-blue is doing well. Red-green has been doing really, really well, but I haven't heard people complain about it yet. Don't let them look at the archives, because red-green's really been cleaning up if you actually start counting.
Okay.
But infantry is so fun, though.
Is it?
I think it's really fun. Yeah. I mean, I have such a soft spot for creatures like this that are like protect the queen, snowballing style creatures, which is why I'm also kind of into the idea of a curiosity deck in this cube.
I mean, you also played this. This has been like a reason that people are playing stuff like Blossoming Defense, where it's like, yeah, this guy's going to get huge and you want to protect it. But, maybe try Spellgorger Weird instead.
I will not, and you can't make me. And it's not because I have a bias against Spellgorger Weird, it's because the card is bad, and it's not worth building that deck for Spellgorger Weird.
I mean, I don't mind cutting a red 2-drop because I feel like that's the highest.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm all into cutting red 2-drops, especially all the ones we've already identified, which includes Hobble Fiend, Blood Aspirant, Thermo Alchemist, and Karizev. I won't miss those. I will miss Electrostatic Infantry personally, but I'll put it in the pile. It's your cube. I feel like we haven't talked about white much.
No, it's perfect.
Can we touch on white? Do you have time, James? Are we keeping you too long? You've been
No,
hard out?
I can be here. No, at like 7 p.m. So
Okay, cool.
we got a while.
Cool.
gonna be a
Let's
long
definitely
episode.
get it done before
Let's
7 p.m.
let's hunker down.
I saw that James pull some white cards. I pulled some white cards too after James went through. And after James had already picked over it, what I mostly found, save for one card, were cards that I just think are kind of maybe too good
Oh, okay.
in a weird way. The one card I found that I don't think is too good is Phalanx Leader. I think this is like a really big payoff for the heroic deck, but the fact that it's double white, and I will never play this on turn 2 because it just dies to so much removal, and I care so much about protecting this, Those two combinations of things mean that I have played really good heroic decks I've been very happy with, and they have not included Phalanx Leaders because it's so hard to make work.
To me, that actually makes it
compared
work.
to like Favorite Hoplite. Like Favorite Hoplite, I think is so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me,
which was the
that
common
kind of,
from the same set, I believe. It was like supposed to be the worst version of Phalanx Leader, but I think it's
both
just
might be rares.
this is definitely uncommon. I'm looking at it right here.
Oh, weird. Double white is difficult, but I feel like often you do want to wait till you can actually like play it and then target it the same turn. I think that like there are not a ton of heroic creatures, and there, I don't think there need to be. There's like 5 or something in the whole cube, but I feel like
There's stuff that cares about power. There's stuff that has other keyword abilities. Like Swiftblade Vindicator is not a heroic card, but it is a heroic card. Let's be real. All
right, what else you got? I think I'm gonna hang on to that one a little longer.
I have one. I know we're not mostly suggesting cards, but have you considered Silver Fur Partisan for this cube?
Is that a green card?
It's a green card. I think it's a really cool heroic adjacent card. It's a 3-mana 2/2 that when you target it, you make a 2/2 wolf.
I like that card.
I have not.
I think it's kind of cool.
The art kind of messes with me, though. I don't know why.
I think it's cool. You don't like the art?
Here's the thing.
It's
oh boy.
weirdly anthropomorphized.
Yes.
Well, yeah, it's a little furry adjacent, but that's so are a lot of the Innistrad werewolves, I feel like.
Well, it's just like he hasn't like transformed from his like abs down yet.
Maybe you're looking a little closer.
There's some important transformations that have happened.
Everybody look at Silver Fur Partisan and just
check
really,
out the
really look
cards
at it.
mentioned page that will list Silver Fur Partisan.
Then I find Unbreakable Formation to be really, really swingy.
Yeah.
I think it's correct to put
people
in
don't
most
play it
decks
often, but when they do, people are like, "Oh yeah, this card's great."
But it's a classic, like, does literally nothing when you're behind.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically it could give you like one round of okay blocks when you're behind, but realistically it does nothing when you're behind. And when you're ahead, I've never seen this cast as a combat trick. It is always cast as a haha overrun, now I win.
True.
Which is not my favorite play pattern, and I also don't think it's necessary. It's essentially for that same like heroic deck. It puts counters on things. It cares about having a bunch of creatures in play. But I feel like I would much rather have just like God's Willing or whatever. Like I'd much rather have that for that deck than Unbreakable Formation.
All right, you've convinced me.
We have talked about this card before, and I'm sure you will not want to cut it, but I still think Restoration Angel is in the exact same Whirler Rogue Carry Zev territory.
That is, it's exactly on my list next to Whirler Rogue.
Perfect. I'll put it in the pile.
I love Restoration Angel.
Yeah.
There's the new 3-mana 1, which I think is not as good because it doesn't have Flash, but it's a 3-mana 3/3 flyer that does the same thing.
Ooh, that's real pushed. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as good as Restoration Angel, but it's close. If you wanted something similar.
I don't know if I agree. That's hard. I think the 1 mana for Flash
and the additional toughness.
Yeah, but
the whole point that Restoration Angel can like save a thing from removal, like if you get to do that in this cube, like GG's, lights out. Like not only do I get a 3/4 flyer for an incredible rate, but also I fizzle a removal spell.
Yeah.
The other one is just going to basically reuse it out of the battlefield ability and be a undercosted flyer. If you really want that kind of effect, that to me feels like a more fair version of that.
No, I mean I think it's there because angels are cool and it's an iconic card.
So the new one's Angel too,
and
I
I've
think.
also got already, where are they? Amira Angel and Shalai are both still here in this list, so I feel like we
Or
got...
just put like Flicker Wisp in. Flicker Wisp to me is like a perfect regular cube card.
I like that.
That does the same kind of thing, is more susceptible to removal, but also has other edge cases of like, I flicker your token, haha, it's gone.
What do you think about
some people will definitely say that, and I can see that argument. I don't think it's going to come up very often. Just don't tell anybody. People aren't going to think about it if you don't tell them.
Okay, I just told them. You want to bleep that? You want to bleep that?
I'll bleep the whole thing out and just have me saying, don't tell them that.
Can't believe you said that,
That can
Andy.
be pretty funny. And the last card I have pulled here in the exact same category. I bet it's on your list.
Uh-oh.
Lingering Souls.
It's on my list, but people love it. People love that card.
I do not love playing against
Do
it.
you love that card?
I feel like
James?
I build a deck to try and do something, and I get blanked by one card. And I feel bad about it.
I don't have hard opinions about it. I think it is like one of the best cards in the cube, without a doubt.
Agreed.
I think it also plays into the decks that are already really good that don't need this
true.
card. It's like the sacrifice decks and the token decks are already so good in black, red, black, white. Like, not really red, white, but theoretically it's possible. That, I don't know. To me, it's like the payoff is not worth the power delta to me there.
This is difficult.
Spend it on something else powerful. And also, like, maybe put it this way. Maybe we just play with it enough for now, right?
Yeah,
we know what this card does. Spend it on another power outlier that
That's
you think
fair.
is too good. That
I like
you
that
know,
argument.
Like, just like try something else for a while. And if you miss
it's
it,
not
you
cut
can always
forever.
put it back in.
It's going to be in a box.
Yeah, I guess 4 1/1 flyers. There's not a lot of decks that really beat that.
No.
Yeah.
And people, I mean, my favorite moment with that card was when Jay, who will always play this card, is
Literally.
playing like mono green.
He'll be playing blue green,
he's like,
and
I
he
will-
plays Lingering Souls. And I think it's honestly
And he's-
correct a
yeah,
lot of the time.
Absolutely.
It's that good.
All right, you got one more white card there you want to talk about?
No,
Actually,
this is
James
already
has a bunch
Felix
as well.
later. I just didn't put it back in the pile because you have it over there.
All right, I want to make 2 easy cuts. I'm just like really happy to cut a double face card. So Legion's Landing is cool, but
Oh,
Oh boy,
Daniel.
do not tell Daniel.
don't tell Daniel. Bleep this out just for Daniel.
This card is really complicated. I'm a little surprised you had it in the cube in the first place,
Yeah.
so I'm not surprised to see it go.
I like it. There's some fun
I would love to
stuff
see
it can
another
do.
1-drop take its place.
Yes.
Is my only
So
caveat.
I got that note there. But yeah, it's also cutting another unique token. It's like, of all the double face cards, that's one that I like because it does sort of like set up this little mini game. It's like clear. The payoff is like, I'm going to get something good, so you don't like really need to pay a lot of attention to what's going on the back.
It
But
was on stream that you got to do the thing where you flipped it into
Yeah.
enough mana to do
Yeah.
something really
That was
important.
cool.
I vaguely remember what happened, but I was like, that's exactly why Legion's Landing is cool.
Yeah, I could pay for, what's his name? Kithian.
Kithian.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you attacked, and it gave you mana to activate Kithian to make it indestructible, so I couldn't even block. It was pretty
That was a
good.
different cube. Different time. I'm also just going to cut Divine Arrow for Elspeth's Smite. I think this card's
Great.
fine.
That
People
makes
don't
sense.
love it. Austere Command.
Smite, by the way, is perfect here.
I agree.
You have enough things that care about being exiled from the graveyard. I think it's great.
Okay.
Can't wait to cast it.
Austere Command. I'm going to put that on the stack.
I won't miss this. I think some people think it's overpowered. Some people think it's not good.
I think it's overpowered. I feel like Wraths are still something that we have a difficult time evaluating in this context. I think having both that and by invitation only,
Which are both like the main deckable wraps, even if you're a heavy
Yes.
creature deck.
I think having both of those feels like a lot of that. So that leaves us with by invitation only, Planar Outburst, and Rout as these 3 Wraths that we still don't really know what to do with. But by invitation only is good.
That's the card I like the most out of all the Wraths,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think it's the best one. It's the card I like the least, though.
Interesting.
Sure.
I feel like there's
I agree.
It's
Well,
the kind of
th-
situation
not
where
about
like there's
liking it, but-
there's so many. The fact that you get to free roll an actual board wipe that just clears the entire board if you're behind, or if you like have a slow draw, or if you have it in your opening hand, you just bait your opponent into playing into it. You get to free roll that in a deck where like it's almost always also just fine to cast it. Sometimes it's not worth 5 mana, right, to like get rid of one of their creatures or whatever, but like there's never a bad board state where like by innovation only isn't great. We've talked about this before in the show. I don't love the design of that card. I think it's like you made it powerful, cool, but I don't love and also you just get to jam it in every deck and feel fine about it.
Yeah.
Personally.
I mean, my favorite by invitation moment so far was I had Odric's Outrider, which whenever a creature you control dies, you put a counter on a creature,
Yeah.
and a Scurry Oak, which whenever you put a counter, you get a squirrel. I managed to navigate to. I got very lucky. I had exactly.
I'll have you know that I conceded before any of this happened.
No, this
so
wasn't against you.
Oh, you did it
Maybe-
against someone
maybe I
else
did this-
too?
yeah,
You were
so-
almost going to do it against me, and I conceded.
I had
before
exactly
it
one
happened.
more creature than my opponent, and I cast this, sacrificed my whole board except for the Scurry Oak, and then put a ton of counters on my Scurry Oak, and then spit out a bunch of new squirrels.
Wow.
And then they kind of stabilized.
Did they follow it up with a Cinderclasm?
No, but it was, I don't know, it got weird.
Wow.
All right, so Austere Command out, by invitation only, still in for now, but we're not all.
I will say I do think that is a card that is going to lead to
I'm
a
not
lot
going to
of
complain
feel
about
bads.
it. I'm not going to complain about it yet, but I don't love the design of the card. I don't think
Okay.
it's great,
Sure,
personally.
In
I like
this
that the card
environment
exists.
being-
I think it's cool that in the pantheon of all the board wipes in Magic, we have this one that exists. I think it's funny that they were like, we need a board wipe that cares about the number 13,
Yeah.
and they ended up making this card that I forget it has the number 13 on it sometimes because, it's kind of arbitrary. But it's
I
not
think
for me.
It's a Wrath that has more flexibility, so it is like, hey, people don't know how to play Wraths. This will get it into decks. What you
Oh.
got, James?
So I pulled out some. I mean, the two big ones I guess that I would want to talk about are Pacifism and Bound in Gold, which I recognize that like I am.
They're bad.
They're
They're bad.
Pacifism is like iconic, but there's a lot of like other cards I think that they printed recently that are just like strict upgrades in like some really interesting ways. I think Bound in Gold is like the issue is that leaving the body on the battlefield I find in this cube
So
is
bad.
so much more
So bad.
relevant
Yes.
than like
Which
an
I think is
Oblivion Ring
also
effect.
fun when your opponent pacifies your thing and then you get to sacrifice it.
Yeah,
That's
it's fun. It's
upside.
fun to make your opponent's cards hog shit. That's true.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
There's like a particular feel bad. I guess like removal being bad feels so much worse than I think a lot of other card types being bad in Magic the Gathering.
Sure. It's
I
like
agree.
I have the answer and the answer doesn't even matter.
I don't
Right.
even look
So-
at those as removal in my deck. Like,
Okay.
to me, this is way closer to a bounce spell, where I'm like, this will be valuable sometimes if I'm aggressive, and otherwise, I just don't look at it as removal in this cube.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you halfway. I actually have in my notes that I'm willing to cut one of the enchantment-based removal spells because I just like looking at the list. I'm like, there are a bunch of these. It's like just a little. They also just like logistically make the board states a little more difficult to manage, which all that is important. So let's cut Bound in Gold and leave Pacifism for now.
Can I also just say, I think Path to Exile would be abundantly appropriate here.
Interesting. I don't disagree. I mean,
the card's downside is way bigger than I think a lot of people appreciate. People are like, oh yeah, you have the 2 really good exile removal spells, Sword Splashers and Path to Exile. And it's like, hold on a sec. One of those is so much better than the other.
Yeah.
It's not even close. And I think that exile removal is really valuable here. It's why I'm so excited about Elspeth's Smite. Mm-hmm. I also think that a lot of the existing removal in the form of Bound in Gold and Pacifism are just, I don't look at it as removal. I'm like, this is not going to remove, let's say, 75% of the things I care about. Because
gets rid of Honored Hydra.
It's great against Honored Hydra and almost nothing else. And even then, there's so many decks that care about sacrificing their own creatures. It's like, okay, well, great, you have Pacifism dip, but they're still going to get to trigger all of their stuff and ping you and sacrifice it to weaponize the monsters. It's like, it just...
Even, like,
it's
put
a
it
big
on
feel
Earl
bad
Squirrel,
here.
they can't make more squirrels, but...
they cast a fight spell.
Or if they have any tokens, like Earl of Squirrel, people forget, pumps all of your tokens.
I mean, the fight spells is another great example of why these cards are bad. It's like, great, I got rid of your Hydra. It's still just sitting there to be a fight spell target.
True.
Like, I feel like everything in this cube lines up really bad against pacifisms that I'm just... I play them sometimes. I'm still pretty high on Captured by Legax, specifically because that card says, not only do you want to cast this card when you have creatures, but you want to be attacking. And that's the only place where I want to play these cards because they're basically like tempo cards as far as I'm concerned. And Captured by Legax pays you off for that by removing the blocker. Like, if Captured by Legax was like a repulse that put 2 counters on a creature, I think it would play very similarly.
Or like even like put a stun counter on a creature.
Sure, it will play very similarly.
2 stun counters.
But there you can really take advantage of that temporary board benefit to like actually push through damage.
Launch the fleet. So this is one of the cards that I pulled out. I think the big thing for me here is like, yes, it is a heroic payoff, right? You can target multiple creatures and get multiple like triggers and whatnot. What I don't like about it is that it itself doesn't affect the creatures, like how the creature attacks in any way. And I think a lot of times what the heroic decks really want is like something that changes their power and toughness to let them get into combat and continue to like pressure the life total. Like the fact that this doesn't, like, it's great in like a board stall, like where your opponent is somehow stabilized and you're really trying to set up for like one big alpha. But
it's also great when you're ahead.
It's also, but
so many cards are great when you're ahead, so not really necessarily worth mentioning.
Yeah, it just doesn't really provide a lot of it doesn't provide the kind of value that I want out of my heroic deck in the early turns of the game, right? Like, I'm hoping that the creatures that I am targeting in order to get the heroic trigger are pumping themselves, essentially.
Sure.
Right?
I'm not as low on the card as you are, but I will say that I don't prioritize it very highly because it does feel like the card that is great when your deck is already doing its thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help your deck actually really do its thing, which...
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's the challenge of the AB decks, right? Like the heroic decks are like you need creatures with heroic or heroic-esque abilities in the sense of like Swiftblade Vindicator or maybe Silver Partisan in the future, and you also need things to target them with, and it's already kind of difficult to draw those in the right combination of things that I don't want an additional limitation that's like, well, this card's also not good at protecting my stuff. If they're going to put a removal spell at it, it's like it's only good at doing this one thing, which is like I'm going to swing for a big, alpha strike.
Yeah, I agree. But I also think the card's kind of fun, and it actually just does a lot of stuff. Like, it is fun to watch people, like, play the card and just do that big swing, so...
I don't think you're going to put it in, but I love all of the wisps, which are just cantripping affect a creature. The white one happens to be just make a creature white till end of turn, which is essentially flavor text, so you're probably... Actually, I think they're all just making the creature that color.
They all have a secondary effect, don't they?
Oh, it says tap that creature. That's not good. Get the white one out of here. I love the red one because it's basically another copy of Expedite, and I love Expedite. The cantripping targeting things I love so much more than any other type of spell in the heroic deck. I'll take those over I'll take those over pretty much anything except for like the really broken stuff because they just make my deck function. And they're not overpowered, but it just says that like in a pinch I can just target your thing and draw a card end of turn, right? And having my heroic trigger spell also do that is so valuable to me that I really, really value that. I can't help but recommend cards. I already recommend Silver Partisan.
Yeah, no, that's half the thing.
There's another card that I wanted to recommend to you, and I thought to recommend it to you. Then I said, I'll wait to recommend it on the podcast. But this was months ago, and I forgot to recommend it on the podcast, or it never came up. I think...
You just gotta come up to me and be like, bonus episode, right now.
I think Feldon Ronom Excavator, it's another red 2-drop, which is the downside.
Yeah, that's the...
But
we got a bunch, though. We got a bunch in that pile.
But the secret mode on that card, right? It's the 2-mana 2/2 with haste that when it is dealt damage, you exile that many cards from the top of your library and you can impulsive draw one of them, I believe. So it essentially kind of reads like a cantripping 2/2, right? You can, if it dies in combat, you get to at least get a card back, which is nice. But the secret mode here is that with all of the divided damage burn spells, which you're playing for heroic triggers, it also just draws a card. because you get to exile top card of your library. You point 1 damage at it off of Arc Lightning, 2 damage at your opponent's stuff. You get to draw a card. I think it is generically fine. Like, I'm not like thrilled to jam this in another deck, but it's still like I'll play it in my red-green aggro deck. I'll play it in my black-green sacrifice deck, my black-red sacrifice deck. But in specifically the heroic deck, I think it gets like a huge boost in terms of being valuable. Also, your opponent doesn't want to block it, which is kind of cool for that deck too. I don't know.
The spooky thing about this card to me is like you attack and your opponent has a big board. They're just like, cool, block with my whole team, exile the top 12 cards from your library.
Does it exile them permanently?
Just exiles them.
I mean, that I think is awesome.
Okay.
If that happens, I think that's sick, to be honest.
Okay.
I would not be upset if that ever happened. If that ends up happening a whole bunch, then I guess maybe we could have a problem with it, but that to me is kind of cool. I have one last thing on the heroic deck. I think you're both going to be surprised. You're probably not going to like it. I don't think the deck needs Feather, and I think we played a lot with Feather, and I don't think that the deck needs it to be drafted. And this falls into the category of, like, we've played this so much. We know what this does. We were just talking about how a 3-mana 3/3 might be overpowered. This is a 3-mana 3/4 flyer with upside. I don't think you need this to get into this deck. I think there's enough other payoffs now that this is no longer a, like, essential signal to make sure this deck is present. And I wouldn't miss it, personally.
James?
So here, I guess I'm not a heroic drafter.
I don't think I've ever seen you play that deck.
And if Feather's not in the cube, I'm never going to draft heroic. Like, for me, if I get in heroic, it's off the basis of pack 1, pick 1 Feather. But this is also just like,
Have
we're
you
talking
ever
about
done that,
me.
though?
No.
Because I think you're going to take a, like, B+ black card over
Yeah,
Feather
you're right.
every time.
All right. I recuse myself from this conversation off the basis of I'm never drafting heroic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, again, you could always edit back in. I just feel like this is also secretly just great if you have no heroic triggers. Like, it's secretly a Whirler Rogue. I don't think most people will play it that way, but
I will.
A 3-mana 3/4 flyer.
You've seen me do it.
I said most people. I think most people in the playgroup see this and are like, oh, I have to be in a heroic deck. And that's honestly, that's its benefit here, is that it tells you this is a theme in this cube that you can play around. I think it shouts it so loudly and has the side effect of also just being like, oh, I'm a blue-white control deck that has some red mana. Great, now I have a 3/4 flyer for 3.
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
I mean, we've talked about this card a lot, and it was like a card that we talked about, especially when I cut Kess and some of the other power outliers that were,
Kess really was a problem. Why do we have Kess in this cube?
It was fun.
It's really fun, but
it was really, really oppressive, and it was like you had to answer it. Even if you did have an answer, it's like it was always just like 5 mana. I also get to cast this removal spell from my graveyard
also a 3/4 flyer is the thing. It's like it's so hard to remove Kess.
But we talked about how this was much more appropriate because it took more build around. It was not just like, oh yeah, I just have like some cheap removal and like I already want the things that Kess asks you to be doing, whereas this does ask you to do something different. I agree that you don't actually need to be doing that for it to be a very powerful card.
But realistically, the vast majority of the time it ends up in a heroic deck, and I think the heroic deck is totally fine if you never draw Feather. In which case, it's like, do we even need this here? And like, I would love to see, like, throw me Felden Ronom Excavator, throw me, like, 1 or 2 other, again, like, B pluses instead of the A++ of Feather, and I think that deck is still, even if only because everyone in this playgroup knows that's a deck in this cube and has, like, played against Feather, I think if you cut it, most people wouldn't even notice. It's a 450-card cube.
It's true.
They wouldn't notice for a long time, and they'd still be drafting this deck and having success with it.
I have been seeing people play Annex and Symede, which I think is also very cool, and it's, like, got first strike all the time.
For me, Baird is the one. I think Baird is in the exact same, like,
for sure.
The exact same area, and I like Baird better, actually.
Okay.
I don't think it's as powerful, but in terms of, like, cube design-wise, I like what Baird does a little better. It's, like, less swingy. It's, like, gives you a little bit of payoff, even if they have removal, but also doesn't take over the game.
This hurts less than Lingering Souls.
I'm a little surprised at that, but there's so many places you can cast Lingering Souls. It's in so many cubes. Like, to me, like, one of the cool things about this cube is that it's a place where you can play Feather. Mm-hmm. But also, do we have to do it anymore? I don't know. That's my suggestion.
Okay. But we're going to keep this Phalanx Leader.
Silver for Partisan. Give me Silver for Partisan and Felden instead of Feather.
I'm doing the balancing of the token creep in my brain. It's like, okay, we lost a couple tokens over here. We're going to add a couple.
Do you have no wolf tokens anywhere?
No.
It's a pretty common token overall, but I guess you don't have anything that makes wolves right now.
Nothing.
Maybe it'll unlock some new cards that you were previously ignoring for token creep reasons that now you want to
I don't put that much emphasis on it. It is definitely like a tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's my stack of cards that I pulled personally.
The black section is all good? Oh, wait, no, we talked about
black
Skeleton.
Cards. I didn't pull very many black cards. James pulled some black cards that I would have wanted to talk about, so maybe we'll end there, but...
oh, yeah.
So are we talking about the one, like, should we just, talk about the elephant in the room?
Sure, let's do it.
Why is Plague Engineer here? So
To ruin everybody's day, except for the player casting Plague Engineer, I think is the answer.
Well, okay, so here's my answer. I think I put it in here before it became an iconically well-known powerful card. I think I put it in right away.
Is a totally reasonable explanation where it's like, oh, this card seems cool for my cube, and then all of a sudden everyone was like, wait a minute, this card is broken everywhere.
It's like it does a little bit of tribal stuff. Like, I think especially as an answer to tokens, which are pretty heavy here, feels like a reasonable counterplay to that.
Get Echoing Decay in there instead.
Ooh, I do like that. Yeah, so for me, I have Plague Engineer as if I were to roto draft this and I had pack one, pick one, I would take Plague Engineer. I think there's
classic Ryan Sachs move.
I think the only reason not to do that, I agree. I think the only reason not to do that would be if you really wanted to strongly stake out a deck. Like if you really wanted to be like, I'm gonna be Feather, I'm gonna be red green or whatever, then you could take Bloodbraid Elf or Feather. I think if you're just taking the most broadly playable power outlier in the cube, I agree it's Plague Engineer.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's like Lingering Souls and some other cards, but I think it's that one.
The amount of X1s that are in this cube is really high. The amount of tokens that are just 1/1s is also extraordinarily high. It just
every deck has to attack.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
No deck
doesn't
doesn't care about Plague Engineer.
Right. And I think this is also a card that newer players to the cube read and they don't necessarily see
that's
there you
as powerful as it is.
That's
there
a
you
compelling
go.
point.
I've gotten past Plague Engineer way more often than I would expect. And then if I'm playing a black deck, one of the other things that I'm also trying to do just naturally in the black color pair is reanimate or get cards back from the graveyard with I think
got Unearth in
Waltz.
here. Yeah.
Right. There's just been I've played with this card a lot in this cube, and I've very infrequently I think cast it just once in a game where it's entered the battlefield.
That's true.
Now you're starting to get some sense of why James has so much success with red-black. He's passed Slate Plague Engineers, and he, quote, always casts them multiple times in the same game.
Well, there's also
you play Grave Shifter, get it back. We've all been there.
Well, also Ephemerate, right? The ability to play it, name okay, I'll name human and kill your 2/1, and then they go and they play some other random creature type, and I just Ephemerate and name a new creature. That happens a lot.
GG's.
Yeah.
If I'm playing the Esper deck, I could have
Restoration Angel.
The Restoration Angel, but a Soul Herder to just reset it every time.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it. I think I'm done with this card.
You're done with Soul Herder?
Wow.
We could have a whole conversation about this card. I actually don't think it's broken, but I agree that when it goes off, it feels terrible.
Right.
And so it's it really harshly punishes you for not taking removal. And is the payoff fun? No, it does the same thing over and over again. That's not fun.
Yeah. It's fun to do it with a Mana War one time, but it's not fun for your opponent.
I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments. I know a lot of people have fun with Soul Herder.
Yeah.
I will say the fun thing about it is that you get to pair it with whatever ETB ability you want. And that flexibility is cool. It's ooh, what am I going to build this time? But then you do that thing over and over and over and over again, and that ends up being not a very fun game, at least for your opponent and probably for you eventually.
Okay, fine. Plague Engineer. It does answer Soul Herder.
R.I.P. And by R.I.P. I mean rest in piss, Soul Herder. Rest in piss, Plague Engineer. You will not be missed.
Yeah. And I think some of the other black cards that I pulled out, the big one that I think is kind of adjacent to Plague Engineer, or in terms of game plan, is Aesurith the Awakener. So 3/3 Death Touch, which I think plays really well to the board. It also attacks really surprisingly well in this environment. Your opponent can double block it, which is true. But its ability to reanimate things from the graveyard, I think, is more. I guess this card selecting this card is more is more me wondering if there's too much of a high density of reanimation effects in black in the cube currently, because I feel most of the decks that I wind up drafting that include black are aggressive, but also I put a lot of emphasis on finding the room for the reanimation effects. Blood for Bones is another card in this cube that I really love and I think is really undervalued.
That one pays you for building around it. This one's just a 3-mana 3/3 Death Touch if you don't build around it.
So I'd be happy to cut this card, but maybe for different reasons. I just never see people do the thing. I think it's an aspirational card.
I remove it a lot.
But you have to pay the... Okay.
I will say this. I think this type of feedback from the red-black player saying, I win with this color pair all the time, and I shouldn't have access to these cards, I take that feedback more to heart than I think any other kind of cube feedback. The least helpful is I lost this card and I'm mad about it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. You're always mad about the cards you lose to, fine.
I have done this to people so many times, and they just let me keep doing it to them.
I'm tired of seeing the soul leave my opponent's face as I continue to beat them down with this card. Please give me new tools to remove their soul with.
Yeah, there's a lot of blood for
blood. Get out of there.
Blood for Bones.
But you haven't flagged Blood for Bones. You want that to stay.
I think what Andy said. It's enough of a build around where I'm fine with.
I have exactly one complaint with Blood for Bones, and I always think it's the bigger version of Village Rites, and I have to remind myself it's not the bigger version of Village Rites. What's the one with the 7 mechanic art that like you sacrifice 2 creatures and draw 4 or some shit?
I have no
Bankrupt
idea.
in Blood.
Sure.
That
Bankrupt in
sounds
Blood?
Like that could be it.
Bankrupt in Blood, sacrifice 2 creatures, draw 3 cards is what I always think it is. Just because
Gotcha.
I think Blood and I think they came out in like the same year. I don't know. I get them
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah.
There's also the white card, the reanimation effect in white that like gets 2 creatures from the graveyard if they have like power 2 or less. I'm sorry, the black-white
The
card.
black-white graceful
Yeah.
graceful
I think
Restoration.
restoration.
that card is also. I think like in general, people
That's
should
like
be
the kind
taking
of
the
card that
reanimation effects a lot higher.
I'm happy splashing. That's
Sure.
like the
Yeah.
reason I end
That's
up playing
splashable,
like
I really like
Esper
that card.
or
Yeah. So what is Macabre Waltz still in the cube?
it is, yeah.
Yeah. There's a high density of ways to get things back from the graveyard,
True.
just amongst like sorceries that can get 2 creatures back if like you discard like a land or something along those lines, and then just like creatures that also incidentally like bring things back from the graveyard. That I don't know if there's a too high of a density, but I always seem to get them, and I really like that people keep passing me these cards. So I guess I'm just offering that as like a blanket piece of feedback.
All right. Isarith out.
And I guess going to the opposite end of the spectrum, Volt Scourge really confuses me in this cube.
It's an artifact.
I think it's
you can
fine,
put it in any
personally.
deck. It
Okay.
wears pants, so you can combine it with equipment and stuff. If anything, I feel
Flying
like
Lifelink colorless to me, I think with all of the ways to augment power, like I've played this in decks and been totally fine with it.
Sadie agrees.
Say, do you love Vault Scourge?
I've got complicated feelings about Vault Scourge. This is a card, so there's like a selection of cards.
I definitely wouldn't miss it. Like, it's not exciting to me, but
That's the thing, is I never really feel incentivized to draft it, and then when my opponent plays it, I'm always like, whew,
Yeah.
all right, we're sailing
That's
through this
kind of
one.
my feeling about it is I feel like it does have a home, especially in decks that are going to augment it and going to increase its power so you can gain more life. I see a lot of people just sort of like put it in a deck, and I'm
Right.
like, why are you doing
Yeah,
that?
that could be it. Because nobody is. I think a lot of people are taking it maybe because it's an artifact, right? And secretly, maybe the reason you should be taking it is because you want a 1/1 flyer on one that has lifelink. I would be much more afraid of a deck that is trying to leverage Volt Scourge on those metrics, and I've never seen it.
All right. So we're going to leave it in, and this is going to be a challenge to people drafting the regular cube. Hurt James with this card.
Yeah,
we will not bleep this one
you
out.
see me at
Specifically.
CubeCon, just
Yeah.
This last black card you have,
I've-
talk to me about this.
I don't know.
I think that this last one is relevant because I got some very direct feedback at CubeCon last year that this card is completely inappropriate and shouldn't be here.
On which too powerful, or
I think too powerful and more specifically just completely inappropriate. I feel like it is just a
I
very
mean,
unique-
it's one of the few old border cards. It's a thing you would never see imprinted in Modern Magic, where I think a lot of
Absolutely.
the cards you have conform to New World Order design.
have we
Restrictions.
Yeah, so I think I don't know if we talked.
We
said
haven't
card
said the
name.
we haven't
name.
said
Yeah.
the name.
We're talking about Phyrexian Tower, and
Yeah.
I think the thing that this like card really offers, that uniquely offers in like a deck trying to leverage it, is not only the mana generation. That's really important, but like if you're playing a black deck, this just keeps anything that might exile something
that's
on the
true.
battlefield from being exiled, and that's like the most. Other than like the mana generation, that's the most relevant thing that I like include it in decks for, is like if someone is trying to.
That's true of any free sack outlet.
Oh,
there are
for
quite
sure.
a few
But the fact that it just comes on a land that is also attached to
you
something
can't
that
remove.
Yeah.
right, that,
I mean,
that
or you just
creates
talked
additional
about like
mana.
the critical moments where you need to change what Plague Engineer is naming.
Exactly. Yeah. There. What? Relentless Dead is this still? Is that still in the cube?
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of fun. Relentless Dead, Phyrexian Tower, doing some like weird shenanigans with
I mean,
that.
that's just exciting to
Yeah,
me.
no,
but-
I agree. But I think like the flexibility, the fact that it like really blanks a specific axis of interaction that is a weakness for these kinds of decks, and just the fact that it generates 2 mana when you like really want to push the tempo advantage.
And double black too, which is sometimes very relevant. It's sometimes like pretty good mana fixing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so this definitely is a weird card here. It definitely stands out for just like, not necessarily
Is it the
being
only
overpowered.
is it reserve list?
I don't know.
No, it's not. No,
don't
they
think
just
it is.
reprinted it in Jumpstart.
All right.
By just, I mean, again, the last 4 years are all
So you could get a modern frame version if that was part of the problem.
yes. But no, what's interesting to me about this card is that even though it is weird, I feel like it plays differently here than in a lot of environments where it's not just like this turbo ramp doing like really fast busted stuff like fast mana is in a lot of other cubes. Here it is very much like a synergistic piece that fits in with these other effects that you're describing. And that, like, to me, that is all upside, but I think I've gotten the feedback from enough people that just, like, it's too weird, that it doesn't feel like it's...
To me, that's, I think, the most salient feedback. It's just like, I would never expect to find this here. My opponent played it, and I was like, what the heck? Like that, to me, is, like, I think very relevant. I think it has a really high power level ceiling, but I do really like that it kind of forces you to build around it. And like talk about signals for a black-red sacrifice deck. Like Black Sacrifice is written all over Phyrexian Tower.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really cool card, and on the rare chance I get to play it, which is not that often because so many people draft black-red in this cube that I feel like it's never open. But it's, I think, one of the appeals of that archetype that you get to play with a weird old card like this. But I agree, there's not other examples of that in this cube. Of like, here's a weird old card that I think is just cool.
All right, fine.
Yeah, it's one of the few examples, I think, of like a land offering too much for a deck for not any cost.
I guess that's the other question. Do you have any other like really high value lands, period? Maybe that's part of what makes it feel out of place.
Probably Creeping Tar Pit and Celestial. I always say that word wrong.
Colonnade.
So that one are maybe the next closest.
I think I planted that wrong pronunciation of Colonnade
possible.
in your head years and years and years ago, and then someone
Playing
corrected
a long
me.
con.
What's
and
the
then-
wrong pronunciation?
I don't know. I have no idea how to say
We
that
won't
word.
say it. We're not going to plant it in other people's heads.
I
It's
pronounce
Colonnade.
it
Is how you pronounce the word.
Frogger.
I feel like I'm just going to start saying it incorrectly on purpose, and you can just tell me if I get it right or not.
Colonnade.
Okay, that's exactly where I was going to go.
Colon.
That sounds like Gatorade, like the version of Gatorade that never went to
It's
market.
a Gatorade suppository.
Good news.
Oh no.
All right. Did we talk about black
I
cards?
think we talked about a lot of things.
I'm a little bit surprised you didn't pull out this card, the Eldest Reborn. I feel
I
like
think it's bad.
I think
but
it's just like
people
not
want to keep
impactful
casting
enough.
it against
People-
me. Great.
People keep casting it. Let's cut that. I also want to cut Mythos of Nethroi. I really just want this to be 2 and a black instant speed destroy target creature. The rest of the text is just confusing.
You want to be? You could put Soul Shatter in here.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take
got
it.
cool art.
But yeah, I mean this card doesn't fit the like sort of goal of clean cards.
It also
that-
reads really weird.
yeah, reads so weird.
It's hard to read.
Great.
So how many ads did you have? I think you have way fewer ads than we have identified as potential
This
cuts.
wave, this was more than Wait, I'm not even done.
We've also been going for
Yeah, we gotta stop.
1 3/4 hours.
Yikes.
Warrant Warden.
You don't like making a big Sphinx?
I
thought
like
you liked
it.
making
I
a
like
big Sphinx.
it. I think people are figuring out that it's a good card and playing it against
It
me
is a
more.
good card.
I don't see a problem. I mean,
Okay.
to me, the cool like hybrid double-sided cards are part
Okay,
of
I'll
the
put
appeal
that-
of this
I'll put that
cube.
back over there.
Your thrash threats and whatnot. Bedeck bedazzles.
This card says Sapperling on it, so I guess I'll keep it.
Echoing Decay is kind of a better Mythos of Nethroi. It mostly destroys a creature.
Interesting.
It is
Okay.
an instant. And sometimes it kills all the tokens if you're really worried about that.
I agree. I like Echoing Decay is a good ad for this cube.
I want to emphasize, too, after all this conversation we've had, that my normal attitude towards cube cuts is like, just cut. Like don't be precious. Like, your cube is not as good as you think it is. Just, like, try new stuff, get more experience, whatever. But my caveat is that I actually think this cube is very well balanced and has been for a long time. And so I am more hesitant than I normally am to just say, like, cut like crazy, because I do think the cube is overall in a pretty decent place.
It's great. I did a great job.
I mean, you have. I mean, you've been working on it for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been hard work because it's not the kind of cube you can directly compare to others. You are establishing your own power level, which comes with all of its own complications. So I want to, like, caveat all of this, but I think most of these cards we pulled out are just kind of, like, not going to see play for the most part and are kind of free to cut because they're not really affecting things right now.
Yeah.
Surf Air and the Hedgehammer is not affecting anything, nor
Right.
is Hobble Fiend or...
Sir Farron needs to stay.
What? Here's the cards that you told me at some point to put in the cut pile, and you can go through and pick out the cards you're going to
Okay,
miss the most.
it's not as heavy as I expected.
We're keeping Hero of Linnea
You're keeping
Tower.
Hero of Lena Tower.
I'm doing it.
Okay.
People are going to... I mean, okay, fine. I hope you also put Silver for Partisan in so I can have a green heroic payoff that I really am excited to play.
I guess like I might get more interested in that card if you push the blue-green kind of like counter Curious Obsession-esque deck.
Yeah.
I'm
But-
really...
Think about that.
I
Think about it.
I want an environment in which I can play a Curiosity deck, and I think, like, my own cube, for example, is way too removal heavy to be friendly to a Curiosity-style deck. I think the kind of removal you have here is more amenable to it. You also have protection spells. It's bad. It's bad, James. I see your stinky look on your
I
face.
forgot that you had to pay X.
You have to
put
pay.
You
counters
have
on
to-
it.
Yeah, you gotta pay. You gotta give.
It's I'm surprised
How
it's
many-
a rare. It feels pretty rough.
Yeah.
And I like put it in a deck where I like ostensibly had all of the best combinations with it. I was like,
I
I'm going to
think
play
it
this
was-
with Reckless
I think it was
Rage. I'm going to put it
reprinted
big.
At uncommon in some master sets.
It feels like it should have trampled. I don't know.
Yeah, trample would
I'm
have
off
been
it.
trample would have been a lot. I mean, it's pretty rough.
Okay.
And the fact that it starts as a 1-mana 1/1 too
You want
is
to talk
like,
about this card at
Yeah,
all?
I mean, we can. Do you want to?
I don't like that card.
You don't like this card?
So we're talking about Joyra, Weatherlight Captain. I think my biggest problem with it is that like the deck that I want to play it in is not usually red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that as a little bit upside. I like the idea of like that's a reason to then be playing Goblin Engineer because you're stretching into a new color with this artifact deck. Some people enjoy this card.
Goblin Engineer? You're saying the artifacts that you are going to trigger Joyra with, you can now get with Goblin Engineer?
Just
That's
that it's
the
like
idea?
a reason to get into red in an artifact deck, which then like makes that make more sense.
There have been a lot of drafts that I have like happily started. So I remember a very specific draft where bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I opened a pack, I saw Goblin Engineer, I got
You
really
were
excited.
fresh off a can of Diet Coke,
Right.
ready to go.
And I took the
Having
Goblin
a
Engineer.
That was your
Right.
backup nickname. More Diet Coke than man.
I took the Goblin Engineer and it never came together.
Yeah.
And I think that is almost, it's
I'm
compounded.
sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
I ain't reading all that. I'm sorry that happened to you, or I'm
I
happy
love
for
Goblin
you.
Engineer. I want to be clear. I think it's literally, I think it's one of my favorite cards of all time. But
It feels hard to make work here.
Yeah.
But
Because I think the incentives of red do not push me in a direction of drafting a deck that is good with Goblin Engineer, and I think it's a similar problem with Joyra, where if I have what I in my mind picture to be like a really good artifact deck in this environment, it's probably 3 colors, and I'll be Esper. I'm not gonna want to branch out personally into a 4th color to support Joyra. It being 4 mana, and then me having I have to then have cards to trigger in order to draw more cards. Like that's
the only time I've ever seen Joy really go off in this cube was with not artifacts. It was with other like legendary creatures, and like
To be honest, that's cool.
if you're into that, it's like I was misreading Tameshi in your cube. Not misreading. I had shortcutted Tameshi to be an Artifact Matters card, when in actuality it could also get back enchantments, which
Right.
made it a better include in my deck we're going to play on Monday than I initially thought. I think a lot of people look at this and are like, Artifact Matters card, and forget that they can play it alongside Wrath or legendary creatures, or, I mean, you have almost no sagas. Did you cut your only saga just now in Eldritch Reborn?
Some people forget that. Some people don't.
We know Daniel doesn't.
Daniel doesn't. This is here for Daniel.
Well-
Now I want to do this for my cube. I'm jealous. This was like a lot of cool discussion, I think.
This was a lot more discussion than I expected. It's a lot more cards that I have here in my cut pile. I feel like I even said like a couple weeks ago, like, yeah, this cube's kind of like in a good spot.
It is in a
probably
good
don't
spot.
expect to change it a ton, but I'm gonna change
Save
it.
for, I mean, and to
a
be
ton.
and, like for the purposes of discussion, I intentionally pulled some stuff that I thought would be more controversial, right? Like Feather is a mainstay of the cube, and do you want to change that? Up to you. I think you could, and it will be fine, which is the whole point for talking about it. But you have at least a big stack now. I think most of those cards wouldn't actually change the cube that much because they're not the things that are driving the decks are successful. The thing is, the cube is mostly in balance. I think the things we're talking about are actually like little nitpicking issues and just calling out places where there's additional opportunity for more support for things that are maybe falling short, like your blue-green deck or whatever.
I'm excited about this idea for this curiosity theme.
I can't wait to play it.
All right.
Yeah, it does sound like fun.
All right, that's it.
Thanks, guys.
I gotta get this whole
good.
episode edited today because
Wow.
tomorrow I'm going to the Sheep and Wool Festival. Then I'm playing more cubes, so we gotta stop because it's been 2 hours. But thank you, James, for coming on. This has been great. I know we get comments on the YouTube channel all the time that James seems like a delight. I love James. Can James come back? He's really fun. So I'm sure all of our podcast listeners are gonna like you as well. Do you have anything to promote?
Just come to the stream and talk
Cue
to
the
me about
plugs theme.
Spy Kids too.
You're coming to CubeCon this year, so
Yeah, we'll be at
did you
CubeCon.
submit the Brea Cube
I did
for consideration?
No, I'm too scared.
Scared of
it's a
people
very
tearing your
expensive
environment
cube.
apart, or
No.
just scared of it going?
So it's
Scared of
I'm
giving
very
it up.
precious
Yeah,
with it.
no, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. It was like my pandemic project, and
Yeah.
like I very
Totally respect that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about maybe just like, do I need to put my 407th edition Birds of Paradise in there for CubeCon?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to bring as much joy as it's going to bring
For some people.
dread for me? Or can I just put?
Oh,
Yeah.
there's something on the other side of that scale.
No, I'm saying put the joy that some people will have getting to play with it against my dread of
Mm-hmm.
not having it in my possession for a while. And I don't know. I'm considering making a few tiny little version changes because why not? But I feel that anyway. You can meet James and hang out with him at CubeCon, which is a good time to mention that CubeCon, all the Cube submissions are in, and we expect voting to come up soon, so tune into the various CubeCon channels. We're going this year, and we're bringing somewhere between 13 and 16 people, which is a lot more than last year. I'm very excited about it. I also found the perfect Airbnb after a lot of work. I'm really excited about that. But we're done with this episode. It's done. James, thank you for being here. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This show is produced by Anthony, James, and I, just poring over this entire Cuban paper and upsetting Anthony a little bit, but I think in a way that is going to be productive.
Yeah.
You handled it really well. I think this is a hard thing. It's a really hard thing to have this cube, your project you worked on for a long time, be picked apart live on air. But overall, again, I think the cube's in a great place. And if anything, these are tiny little tweaks to an already very successful, fun environment.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think this is going to be good, and I'm excited to be bringing this cube again to CubeCon. Hopefully, it'll be featured. I guess I shouldn't assume.
Well, you're bringing it either way. Presumably.
I'm bringing it either way, and yeah, I mean, I feel like this is good work that will help it serve that experience better.
Amen.
Over and out.
The podcast episode is over.